The tea was still warm when Emily Russo vanished in the town of Lakewood, New Jersey, population 11,204. Friday night, March 8, 2002, arrived with a thick frost fog rolling down from Byrne State Forest into the industrial area south of town. At 10:10 p.m., the night shift manager at Blue Star Diner saw Emily, 22 years old, take off her apron, wave goodbye, and walk out the back door, leading to the parking lot bathed in dim yellow light. She was holding her small purse and car keys, ready to drive her silver-blue Corolla back to her apartment 10 minutes away. A passerby on Industrial Road later recalled seeing Emily stop to talk to a man standing next to a gray sedan, then both disappearing into the fog. The parking lot was empty just minutes later, and the cup of tea on the service counter still had lingering steam. What happened in the next 35 minutes would leave Lakewood with a scar that never faded over the 15 years that followed. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. In March 2002, the town of Lakewood, New Jersey, was shrouded in the late winter chill, with the roads around the Forest Avenue industrial area covered in a thin fog that made the yellow lights from the warehouses scatter unevenly and darker than usual on the ground. Inside Blue Star Diner, the evening shift ended later than usual, and Emily Russo, 22 years old, a freshman student juggling part-time work and classes, was the last one cleaning up the service counter as the wall clock struck 10:10 p.m. She turned off the kitchen lights, checked the back door, and stepped outside, where the large but mostly empty parking lot had only a few cars parked overnight. Near the end of the lot, a strange vehicle had appeared earlier, with no interior lights on, its dark body making it hard to identify anyone inside, but its presence in an otherwise quiet area at that hour stood out as an obvious anomaly in the silent space. Emily walked past it, her steps slowing for a beat, her eyes glancing toward the car, as if checking whether someone was watching her, then continued toward her own vehicle. That was the last confirmed sighting of her that evening. The next morning, Emily did not show up for class and did not answer any calls or messages from her roommate. At first, her friend thought Emily might have stayed over at a friend's place or switched class shifts, but by noon, with Emily's phone still off and no one able to confirm where she had been after leaving the diner, the worry began to turn into clear unease. Emily's family received the call and immediately drove from Newark to Lakewood. By afternoon, with no further information and all signs pointing to something unusual, they decided not to wait any longer. They went straight to the Lakewood Police Department, walking into the duty room in a state of panic and exhaustion, and reported that Emily Russo had disappeared. At the Lakewood Police Department, Emily Russo's missing person report was received late in the afternoon, and the duty officer quickly assessed that this was not a typical case of a young adult voluntarily leaving home. The time without contact had exceeded 12 hours, her phone was completely off, and Emily's stable schoolwork schedule led LPD to classify the case as missing person, high concern, requiring immediate response. The on-duty investigator conducted an initial interview with the family to gather background data. Her shift, end time at Blue Star Diner, the previous night, her usual route home to the apartment on Massachusetts Avenue, her communication habits with her roommate, and any changes in the recent week. At the same time, a profile of Emily's social connections was quickly built: co-workers from the evening shift, the diner manager, classmates, roommate, and a few people who had visited Emily at work in the past month. The investigation team compiled a list of individuals who had contact with Emily in her final 24 hours, including those who saw her leave the kitchen at 10:10 p.m., regular customers present during that time frame, and owners of vehicles commonly parked overnight behind the diner. Due to limited resources in 2002, LPD formed a small investigation team of 3, a lead investigator, a supporting investigator to follow up on scene information, and an analyst to categorize data and contact witnesses. They agreed on an initial deployment process across 3 branches. First, reconstruct a detailed timeline from 5 p.m. to the moment Emily left the parking lot, based on employee statements, customer receipts, and diner operations. Second, expand verification around the Blue Star Diner area, the rear parking lot, the exit to Forest Avenue, and security cameras from 2 nearby convenience stores. Third, immediately verify potential witnesses, co-workers who saw Emily at the back door, the manager who locked up, delivery personnel present near closing time, and anyone in the parking lot when she left. All information was systematized into categories: direct contact, indirect contact, unclear relevance. While the team continued gathering more details from the family and roommate, the lead investigator reviewed all initial possibilities: voluntary departure from town, an accident on the way home, being approached in the parking lot, or leaving with a vehicle without clear witness identification. As preliminary hypotheses were documented, Emily Russo's file was officially opened in LPD's internal system, tagged with high priority, so that any unit in the county would immediately receive alerts for new data. With the file fully activated, the investigation team quickly agreed on the next step: return to Blue Star Diner, the last place Emily was seen, and the only time marker confirmed by witnesses and evening shift operations. The shift manager, responsible for closing the books and inventory, was the first to provide a detailed statement. He said that night wasn't overly busy, mostly shift workers and a few late regulars. According to him, Emily started cleaning the counter around 9 p.m., then helped the kitchen wash utensils before returning to the service area to collect checks. The remaining server on shift confirmed that Emily showed no signs of stress or conflict with anyone, and that she followed the usual closing procedure as always. The team noted a statement that around 9:30 p.m., Emily left the counter area for a short break and then returned to work normally. A kitchen worker said he saw Emily take trash out the back door around 9:50 p.m., marking an important time point as it was when Emily appeared near the exit to the parking lot. From here, the team began narrowing verifiable markers. The manager also provided information that around 10 p.m., he saw Emily return to the counter one last time to turn in the order book and check her purse before leaving. This was the time point confirmed by all staff as consistent. The lead investigator requested a review of the entire closing process, turning off the sign, checking the cash register, signing the daily log, and locking the front door at 10:15 p.m. During this, no one saw Emily return inside toward the kitchen or restroom area, allowing them to rule out the possibility she was trapped in the internal part of the diner. The delivery person who picked up the last order at 9:40 p.m. was also verified as unrelated. While collecting statements, the team requested access to the diner's only analog camera, mounted near the front door, which recorded on tape for only 24 hours with low resolution and limited angle. The tape was rewound from 8 p.m. to 10:30 p.m., but the camera only captured people entering and exiting the front door. The back door, where Emily left, was completely outside its range. However, the investigator noted that no suspicious individuals entered or exited the front door in the 30 minutes before Emily's shift ended, reinforcing the assessment that any incident related to her occurred in the rear area or parking lot. The lack of a rear camera meant the timeline had to rely entirely on statements and staff activities, forcing the team to cross-check each time marker to minimize errors. To complete the timeline from 9 p.m. to 10:10 p.m., the lead investigator required all staff present that evening to detail where they were in each 10-minute interval, a common method when lacking visual data. The server noted being mostly cleaning tables in the east section from 9 o'clock to 9:20 p.m., from 9:20 to 9:40 p.m., closing checks and returning items to final customers. From 9:40 to 10 p.m. collecting trays and wiping the counter area. This data helped cross-reference the statement that Emily took trash out at 9:50 p.m. and returned to the counter as the manager confirmed. The team also examined the last time the back door was opened that night, based on kitchen staff habits, but without sensors, they relied on memory. One kitchen worker recalled hearing the door slam shut after 10 p.m., but wasn't sure if it was Emily or someone else. This detail was filed under insufficient reliability, used only for cross-reference, not as a confirmed marker. The manager was also asked about any unusual incidents during the shift, such as a stranger returning multiple times, unfamiliar vehicles in the lot, or someone near the rear exit. He mentioned seeing only one dark-colored car parked a few spots from the back door, but since the lot wasn't managed by the diner, he didn't pay further attention. Though this statement lacked license plate details, it became a point to supplement during expanded searches. The temporary timeline summary was completed near midnight. 9 p.m. Emily working at counter, 9:30 p.m. short break and return to counter. 9:50 p.m. taking trash out back door, 10 p.m. return to counter, to turn in book. 10:10 p.m. leaving diner through back door to parking lot. The team marked this as the final frame confirmable by consistent statements and direct witnesses. Though the internal diner timeline showed no clear anomalies, it provided the necessary foundation to expand scrutiny to the outside area, where there were no cameras and where Emily had to pass before disappearing. With the internal timeline firmly established, the investigation team moved to the next critical step, collecting statements from all witnesses present in or near the rear parking lot of Blue Star Diner from 9:45 p.m. to 10:20 p.m. The frame identified as likely containing the final interaction before Emily vanished. Since in 2002 most of the parking area lacked cameras, reconstructing events depended almost entirely on witnesses, and the team had to approach every individual around that night, including evening shift staff from the adjacent convenience store, delivery drivers leaving the industrial area, 2 men unloading at the nearby warehouse, and a woman living in an apartment overlooking the lot. The team noted the first witness as the convenience store employee open until 11 o'clock. Who said, around 10:05 p.m. he saw a female figure leave the diner's back door, carrying a light-colored purse, matching Emily's description, and he also saw a male figure standing near the area, beside a dark-colored car parked by the right side fence. He couldn't confirm if they spoke due to distance and poor lighting, but he affirmed the man was there before Emily appeared. A second witness, the delivery driver passing through the lot to his truck, said he saw 2 figures standing a few steps apart, the female heading toward the parked cars, the male slightly back toward the lot's corner. He described the male as about a head taller than Emily, slim build, wearing a dark baseball cap, long-sleeved shirt, and standing slightly hunched as if looking at a phone or something in his hand. The witness couldn't confirm if they knew each other, but noted the male didn't seem hurried or moving much, just standing in place. A third witness, one of the warehouse unloaders, reported seeing a dark-colored car parked in an area rarely chosen at night, near the fence row, with a male leaning against the door. He didn't recall the exact time, but believed around 10 p.m. or close to it. When asked if the male left the car upon seeing Emily, the witness only recalled the male not moving immediately, but slightly leaning, seemingly observing movement from the diner's back door. This was the first time the team recorded matching descriptions from 2 separate witnesses about a man's presence in the lot when Emily left. The fourth witness, the woman in the second-floor apartment directly overlooking the lot, told police when they knocked that around 10:10 p.m. or slightly later. She heard a car door close and looked out the window, but only saw the rear of a dark-colored car, no clear plate. She wasn't sure if she saw 2 people or just one due to weak backyard lighting, but she remembered a female figure walking past the car a few seconds before the car, or person beside it, made a sound. These statements led the team to immediately focus on the male figure in the lot, as the repeated descriptions from multiple independent sources, taller height, slim build, dark clothing, standing near an unfamiliar car, indicated he was likely present when Emily left. The data was compiled into a comparison chart. The man's standing position near the right side car row, close to the fence. He didn't move much. The associated vehicle, possibly an older dark sedan, owner unknown. No witness confirmed direct interaction between the male and Emily, but all confirmed their simultaneous presence in the same area. The lead investigator prioritized this description group, and requested recording every detail of build, movements, distance between the two, and final direction seen, no matter how minor. The convenience store employee recalled the male standing angled toward the diner's back door, while the delivery driver said near the front of the car, facing Forest Avenue, meaning the actual position could vary narrowly, but still within the area, all witnesses indicated. The team synthesized into a finding: a man not a diner employee, appearing in the lot shortly before Emily exited the back door, standing beside a strange vehicle, and possibly observing Emily or the back door area. This was the first appearance in the file of a potential individual's involvement in the disappearance, and all witness data was added to the comparison list for the next verification step. After compiling all the witness statements from the parking lot, the investigation team began cross-referencing the description of the man seen near the dark-colored car with the list of individuals who had contact with Emily in her final 24 hours, including co-workers, classmates, regular customers at the Blue Star Diner, and those noted by her roommate or family as having had close contact with Emily in the previous month. On this list, one name stood out more than the others: Luis Navarro, 22 years old, a student at Ocean County College, who had been close to Emily in late 2001 and still occasionally appeared in the area around the diner. Previously, Luis had not been considered noteworthy because he was not among those with direct contact during the evening shift, according to staff statements. However, when comparing the witness descriptions, a young man slim-build taller than Emily, wearing a dark-colored hat. The investigation team found that the details matched Luis's appearance as described by Emily's roommate. An employee at the adjacent convenience store also confirmed having seen Luis several times in the evenings, sometimes standing in the parking lot, waiting for someone, other times just stopping in to buy items and lingering for a while before leaving. When this information was added to the comparison chart, the lead investigator determined that Luis needed to be contacted immediately for an initial statement. The investigation team went to Luis's address on the afternoon of the second day after Emily's disappearance. Luis stated that he had been in the Forest Avenue area on the night of the incident, but insisted that his purpose was only to buy cigarettes at the convenience store and that he did not stop at the diner or see Emily. However, right from the first interview, the investigator noted that the timeline Luis provided contradicted witness statements. Luis said he left home around 9:15 p.m. and returned home around 9:45 p.m. Meanwhile, a witness at the convenience store confirmed seeing someone matching Luis between approximately 10:05 p.m. and 10:15 p.m. When questioned about this discrepancy, Luis said he might have remembered incorrectly and was not sure of the exact times. Additionally, when asked about the dark-colored hat described by witnesses, Luis replied that he was not wearing a hat that night, but this denial was vague and lacking in detail, prompting the investigator to note it as a point requiring further verification. When asked one final time whether he had seen Emily leave the diner, Luis responded that he didn't see anyone, but his hesitant tone led the investigation team to flag this statement as questionable in terms of truthfulness. The compiling officer continued reviewing Luis's activities in the preceding week and discovered that he had appeared outside the diner at the end of Emily's shift twice within the most recent 10 days, according to a kitchen staff member. Although there were no unusual incidents, this repetition led the investigation team to add Luis to the group requiring continuous monitoring. As the data continued to be cross-referenced, the lead investigator requested a full check of the regular parking spots used by frequent customers and staff in the lot to determine whether the dark-colored car described by witnesses was linked to Luis. According to DMV records, Luis owned a 1994 Honda Civic in dark charcoal gray, matching the dark-colored car description from 3 witnesses. Although this was not yet confirmatory evidence, the match provided additional reason to continue investigating Luis. The investigation team also checked travel times from Luis's home to the diner area, concluding that if Luis left home at 9:15 p.m., as he claimed, he could easily have been in the parking lot by 10 p.m. the time Emily was last seen. When cross-referencing all the information, the investigation team noted 3 points of inconsistency. The travel timeline Luis provided did not match witness accounts. The description of clothing and build matched witnesses, but was denied by Luis. And Luis's repeated appearances in the diner area beforehand, which he did not mention during the interview. Although there was no direct evidence showing Luis was the last person to contact Emily, all the data pointed to the possibility that he was in the parking lot during the critical time frame and may have seen something related to her disappearance. The lead investigator concluded that Luis needed to be placed under active monitoring, requesting verification of his alibi through witness cross-checking cell phone records and confirmation of his movements on the night of the incident. The first statement session was closed with the note unresolved inconsistencies, and Luis Navarro was officially marked as the last known individual to be near Emily around the time she disappeared, making him the top person on the list for continued surveillance in subsequent investigation steps. Once Luis Navarro was added to the monitoring group, the investigation team moved to the next step of expanding the search area within a 3-block radius around the Blue Star Diner, a range determined based on the average ground travel capability of an individual within 10-15 minutes from the time Emily left the back door. In the context of 2002, the LPD did not have a dedicated search team, so patrol units, 2 supporting investigators, and the county's K-9 unit were mobilized to coordinate the sweep of the area. The family provided a jacket and a scarf Emily often wore, allowing the K-9 to acquire a standard scent before deployment began. The starting point was set at the exact location of the back door, where witnesses confirmed seeing Emily, after which the tracking dogs were released to follow their chosen direction to detect any natural scent trail the victim might have left. Within the first few minutes, the K-9 led the search team along the edge of the parking lot, then turned toward a small dirt road connecting to a pedestrian path that looped around the warehouses in the Forest Avenue industrial area, a route rarely used at night, but within the possible operational radius of any individual in the vicinity. The investigator noted that the search formation needed to split into 2 branches, one group following the K-9 and the other sweeping straight from the parking lot to the nearest main street to rule out the possibility of the victim heading in the opposite direction. Meanwhile, a third investigation team was assigned to canvass businesses still lit in the industrial area for any additional information about unusual vehicles or individuals around 10 p.m. on the night of the incident. As the K-9 continued leading, the following team observed that the scent the dog was tracking did not extend continuously. Instead, the trail broke off at about 70 meters from the parking lot. This is a common occurrence when the scent source is affected by wind, terrain, or vehicular movement. Upon approaching the edge of the dense wooded patch leading into the undeveloped land next to the industrial area, the K-9 changed direction, circled back, proceeded a few more meters deeper, then stopped and signaled loss of trail. This allowed the investigators to hypothesize that Emily, or someone carrying something of Emily's, had passed through this area, but left no extended scent trail. The search team then proceeded to sweep the forest edge, checking the ground for footprints, dropped items, or surface disturbances. However, the ground was mostly overgrown grass and decaying leaves, yielding no clear traces. An additional search loop was extended toward the container storage yard of the adjacent warehouse, but again, no physical evidence or signs of the victim passing through were recorded. Meanwhile, the patrol group sweeping toward the main street reported back that they found no personal items such as Emily's wallet, phone, or keys discarded along the way. As flashlight beams pierced deeper into the shadows between trees, the investigation team noted no physical signs like torn fabric, bag straps, or contrasting colored items within view. Based on the topographic map, the lead investigator requested a recheck of the wind direction from the previous night to assess if the K-9 scent trail was affected. According to Lakewood weather station data, a light wind blew from east to west throughout the 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. window, making it reasonable that the scent trail could have been deflected. The investigation team also reasoned that if Emily had been placed in a vehicle in the parking lot, the short and broken scent trail would be entirely consistent with the victim not traveling on foot for the remainder of the journey. An additional search, using high-powered floodlights and the industrial area's lot layout diagram, was attempted to check blind spots between containers and scrap bins, but nothing suspicious was found. Upon returning to the parking lot, the K9 was retried from a different starting point, a few meters from the original, to rule out interference in the initial trail. On the second attempt, the tracking dog still led the team in a similar direction, reinforcing the conclusion that it was the likely path Emily or the related scent source had taken. However, as before, the trail disappeared at the edge of the dense wooded patch, leaving the investigation team unable to determine any specific path afterward. At the conclusion of the initial search within the 3-block radius, the investigation team recorded all results in a temporary report: no physical evidence, no clear traces, K9 scent trail broken at the industrial area edge, no additional witnesses beyond those who provided initial statements. Although lacking physical indicators, the K9's guidance was still marked as noteworthy information because it suggested a direction of movement away from the parking lot rather than toward the main street. This became the basis for the investigation team to reassess the likelihood of an encounter or incident in the area between the diner's parking lot and the Forest Avenue industrial zone, while concluding that if a vehicle or individual intervened, it most likely occurred within a short distance, right after Emily left the back door of the diner to head to her car. After the search within the 3-block radius around the Blue Star Diner yielded no useful traces, and the K9 scent trail broke off at the area bordering the woods, the investigation team decided to expand the scope to the Byrne State Forest, not far from the Forest Avenue industrial area, and with terrain complex enough to conceal movement or traces of a missing person. The forest spans thousands of acres, including trails, seasonally flooded lowlands, and dense vegetation strips interspersed with open wooded areas. Due to the vast size, the investigation team could not conduct a linear search, as in residential areas, and instead had to use a grid method. The lead investigator coordinated with the patrol commander to map the northern forest section, identifying the main entry point, where a small dirt path from the industrial area edge leads into the forest, and from there drawing a preliminary grid of 30-meter squares, covering the highest probability area in the direction the K9 had previously indicated. Because forest searching requires significant manpower, the LPD called in local civil defense teams, volunteers with prior forest rescue experience, and the New Jersey State Ranger team, who had expertise in tracking signs on leaf-littered, overgrown, and wet terrain. The Rangers quickly assessed that in early March conditions, damp ground with thick decaying leaves, the likelihood of leaving footprints or dropped items would depend on the extent of movement and the type of footwear worn by the victim or perpetrator. They recommended deploying the search in 3 branches, checking main trails, sweeping low-lying areas such as drainage ditches and wet zones, and broad sweeps by assigned grids. The investigation team agreed and activated the Phase 2 search plan. Teams started from the point bordering the forest, where the K9 had lost the trail, and moved in side-by-side lines, maintaining even spacing to ensure no area was missed. Each member was equipped with high-powered flashlights, marking stakes, grid maps, and short-range radios. The ranger team led the main trail areas, while the civil defense team handled the eastern grids, and the patrol and investigators covered the western grids, where there were many roots, thick brush, and gently sloping terrain prone to slipping. As they proceeded deeper, teams noted various environmental signs, bottles, wrappers, but all were confirmed by rangers as long-standing litter from forest visitors, unrelated to the disappearance. The major trails were swept first. Trail number 4, closest to the industrial area, had soft ground conducive to retaining prints. However, there were no recent footprints or drag marks consistent with the time frame of Emily's disappearance. All recorded shoe prints belonged to hiking boots or running shoes, with tread patterns completely different from the type Emily typically wore. The rangers also checked sections of trail with slumped soil, but found no signs of anyone leaving the trail to enter dense brush recently. Meanwhile, the civil defense team swept low wet areas, such as boggy strips between low rises. These are places where footprints or dropped objects are often preserved due to the soil's suction and shape retention. However, all traces were too old or faded, with nothing matching the time of Emily's disappearance. Drainage ditches running parallel to trails were thoroughly probed with flashlights and poles, revealing only leaf litter, dry branches, and debris carried from the previous winter. By the afternoon of the search day, the patrol team in the western grid noted a suspicious spot, a lightly compressed patch of soil near a large tree trunk. However, upon ranger inspection, they concluded it was only traces from a medium-sized animal, possibly deer or fox, as the depth and shape did not match human weight. Another point was a section of flattened grass about 12 meters off the trail, but close examination showed it resulted from strong wind after prior rain, not heavy object impact. During the search, the lead investigator required all teams to maintain strict logs of covered areas to avoid redundant checks. Ranger data was also integrated into the map to mark difficult access zones for potential deeper searches if additional signs emerged. However, across the entire gridded area, there was no physical evidence, such as fabric scraps, purse, documents, or traces indicating Emily had been there. The K9 was retried at 3 different points in the forest, but all 3 times failed to pick up a clear scent trail, reinforcing the assessment that if Emily had passed through the forest area, she did not go far from the edge, or possibly never entered the forest at all, with the initial trail merely residual scent deflected by wind from the parking lot. As dusk approached, teams had to reduce manpower for safety, as searching in darkness in Byrne State Forest carries significant risks. The lead investigator held a quick debrief at the assembly point, recording all results: no new traces, no related physical evidence, no suspicious points consistent with the disappearance timeline. An additional sweep was conducted along the trail leading to the main road, where vehicle traces or dropped items might be found, but again yielded nothing. The end-of-day report for Search Area 2 was prepared, stating clearly, no physical evidence or signs related to Emily Russo discovered in the gridded area. No evidence the victim entered deep into the forest. K9 signals insufficient to determine direction of movement. Cannot conclude that Byrne State Forest is a location the victim reached or was taken to. With these results, the investigation team had to acknowledge that despite the large forest area being thoroughly searched using standard methods, there were no indicators to advance the case any further from the expanded scene. After the search in the Byrne Forest area yielded no promising results, and no new clues emerged from the expanded crime scene. The investigation team shifted its focus to verifying the alibis of individuals on the list of those who had indirect contact with Emily in the 48 hours prior to her disappearance, a necessary step to eliminate unrelated possibilities and narrow the scope of suspicion. Among them, Mark Devlin, 21 years old, a student at Brookdale Community College, emerged as an individual requiring early verification because he had a history of knowing Emily through mutual friends and had texted her on the evening of the disappearance. Although Mark's interactions with Emily were not viewed as conflictual or motivated by any clear intent, the investigation team decided to take his statement to avoid overlooking any important details. The session with Mark was conducted at the LPD on the morning of the 3rd day after Emily's disappearance. Mark appeared voluntarily, cooperated, and showed no signs of evasion. In his initial statement, Mark said that on the evening Emily went missing, he was in the East Brunswick area, about a 45-minute drive from Lakewood, attending a band practice with 2 friends, Tyler Jennings and Robert Hale. According to Mark, they started practice around 7:30 p.m. and ended around 10:30 p.m., after which Mark stayed an additional 20 minutes to pack up instruments before leaving. He asserted that he did not leave the location at any point and did not travel to Lakewood. When asked about the messages sent to Emily that evening, Mark explained that they were simply a goodnight text and a question about the next day's class schedule, with no urgent or deeply personal nature. The investigators noted no signs of evasion, but proceeded with a comprehensive cross-check to verify the accuracy of the alibi. The investigation team immediately contacted Tyler and Robert to corroborate Mark's statement. Both confirmed that Mark was present at the practice from start to finish, without leaving midway. They also provided departure times. Tyler left at 10:45 p.m., Robert at 10:55 p.m., and Mark last. The investigation team requested further verification by checking the time log from the garage where they rented the practice space. The garage owner confirmed they had booked the slot from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m., and the exterior camera recorded footage of the three leaving the area near 11 p.m. Although the camera was low quality, it clearly identified Mark leaving at that time. A key detail was that the garage had a CCTV sign displaying the date clearly, allowing the investigation team to confirm the video was from the correct night of Emily's disappearance. The garage's automatic time clock also showed no door openings during the session, ruling out the possibility that Mark could have left and returned. Investigators continued by examining Mark's call and message history from that night. Data from the carrier showed Mark's phone signal was located via cell towers in northern East Brunswick from 7 p.m. to 10:50 p.m., fully consistent with his statement. There were no pings from the Lakewood area or nearby, further reinforcing that Mark did not leave East Brunswick during the critical time frame. Subsequently, investigators checked Mark's gas purchases and travel history to rule out the possibility he drove back to Lakewood after 11 p.m. However, Mark had used his bank card at a gas station in North Brunswick at 11:18 p.m., meaning right after leaving practice, and this completely contradicted any possibility of him returning to the scene at the time of Emily's disappearance. The LPD also reviewed traffic cameras along the route from East Brunswick to Lakewood, but found no sign of Mark's vehicle in any relevant time frames. Upon completing the verification process, the investigation team tentatively concluded that Mark Devlin's alibi was solid, corroborated by multiple independent sources, witness statements, garage data, exterior garage camera phone history, and bank card transaction. There were no indications that Mark was in Lakewood on the night Emily disappeared, nor any clear motive that would place him in a high-risk category. The internal report noted, insufficient basis to consider Mark Devlin a suspect, alibi verified, no contradictions. The investigation team officially removed Mark from the list of persons of interest, allowing resources to be redirected to other leads. After verifying Mark Devlin's alibi and removing him from the suspect list, the investigation team moved to another critical avenue, analyzing Emily's phone data from the 24 hours prior to her disappearance. A standard step in missing persons cases in the early 2000s, despite the limited technology at the time. The goals of this phase included 4 points: identifying calls and messages Emily sent or received on the day of the incident, determining when the phone went offline, assessing any unusual contacts before she vanished, and checking the possibility of location tracking from the carrier, though the team understood that in 2002, detailed cell tower triangulation was not yet available. The process began with an urgent request to Emily's carrier, following protocol for high-concern missing persons cases. In the context of 2002, the obtainable data typically included only call logs for incoming and outgoing calls, sent and received messages, device on-off times on the network, and the last recorded cell tower, but without sufficient detail for precise location. After nearly 24 hours of processing, the carrier provided Emily's records for the 72 hours before she disappeared. The lead investigator reviewed each entry and noted that Emily's activity was fairly routine: a short call to her mother at noon, a few messages with her roommate about shift changes, some messages from classmates, and 3 messages from Luis Navarro, a detail the team had anticipated but needed to confirm with data. All 3 of Luis's messages appeared in the evening at 8:58 p.m., 9:17 p.m., and 9:49 p.m. Content could not be retrieved, because early SMS systems did not store message text, but the timing, appearing 20-40 minutes before Emily's shift ended, led the team to note this as a significant contact chain. Emily did not reply to the first two, but sent one message at 9:52 p.m. The content was unknown, but temporarily, this was when Emily was taking out the trash through the back door, according to kitchen witness statements. After 9:52 p.m., there were no further messages or calls from Emily, prompting the team to focus on the period from 9:52 p.m. to 10:10 p.m., when she left the diner, as a key transitional window in the case. The team continued checking for calls or messages from unknown numbers. The data showed only two numbers not in Emily's contacts, but both were service advertisements in the form of automated spam messages from early commercial distribution systems holding no investigative value. There were no missed calls and no undelivered messages. This allowed the team to initially conclude that Emily had no unusual phone communications prior to her disappearance. The most critical part of the data was the time Emily's phone dropped off the network, meaning it stopped activity or was powered off. The carrier recorded the final signal at 10:14 p.m., just minutes after she left through the back door. This was a pivotal marker, as it aligned with witness statements about Emily being near the parked cars in the lot. However, investigators noted that 2002 data only indicated loss of connection, not whether the phone was manually turned off or lost signal due to shielding. Nevertheless, since the area around the diner and industrial edge had stable coverage, the likelihood of terrain-related signal loss was very low. Thus, it was highly probable that Emily's phone was manually turned off or disabled by removing the battery. When reviewing cell tower logs, the team received exactly what was expected. The last tower was general information, insufficient for specific coordinates. The carrier confirmed that in 2002, they did not retain sector location or detailed coverage zone IDs as later technology allowed. Therefore, the team only knew the final signal originated from the Lakewood area, data too broad to narrow the scene. The lead investigator also checked outgoing calls from Luis and Mark in the suspect timeframe to assess if they contacted Emily near when her phone went offline. Data showed only Mark sent a message at 10:12 p.m., but this arrived after Emily's phone was already inactive. This further reinforced that after 10:14 p.m., there was no activity related to Emily's device. Finally, the team reviewed the overall phone data and reached a tentative conclusion. No unusual contacts in the final 24 hours, no strange calls near the disappearance time, and no signs of distress calls or unwanted contacts. The phone going offline occurred just minutes after Emily left work, suggesting the incident may have happened in a very short window, though at this stage, the team could not conclude the nature of the event. The internal report for the phone analysis clearly stated, 2002 technology does not allow location via cell towers, no unusual communications detected. Final signal at 22:14. This was all the phone data could provide at the time. Immediately after completing the phone data review and concluding there were no signs of unusual contacts before Emily's disappearance, the investigation team received a call from a resident in Atlantic City, reporting having seen a girl who looked very much like Emily, walking with a group of young people on the boardwalk promenade on Wednesday evening, just 2 days after Emily vanished. The tipster described the girl as appearing tense, constantly looking around, and seeming to avoid interacting with those she was with. Additionally, she was wearing a light-colored jacket, a detail that caught the team's attention because Emily often wore light jackets, and the family had provided police with a similar one. In the early stages of missing persons cases, especially without physical evidence or specific traces, sighting reports were common and rarely accurate. However, since Atlantic City was less than 2 hours' drive from Lakewood and a crowded area conducive to someone hiding or being taken there, the LPD had to promptly verify. The lead investigator and one officer were dispatched to Atlantic City the next morning, identifying 2 key areas: the boardwalk where the witness claimed to have seen the girl, and a large casino the group was described as entering shortly after. Upon arrival, the team divided tasks. One met the witness for a detailed statement. The other worked with casino security to review cameras. The witness said the sighting was around 8:30 p.m., when the area was still busy. The girl was in a group of 3 or 4, with a long-haired man walking beside her seemingly talking, but she did not respond. When reviewing the witness's description, the team noted several mismatches. The witness described the girl as having dark brown hair down to her mid-back, while Emily had much shorter light brown hair. Additionally, the girl was wearing a small backpack, whereas Emily had left her purse in the diner locker that night and did not habitually carry a backpack. Nevertheless, the team had to expand verification since these points were not sufficient to fully rule out the possibility. Meanwhile, at the casino, security cooperated and allowed viewing of all entrance cameras in the specified time frame. 2002 cameras had low resolution, but were adequate for major features. The team identified the described group entering the casino at 8:41 p.m. The girl with them had a similar build to Emily, but when zoomed in as much as possible, investigators clearly saw mismatches: a higher nose bridge than Emily, a longer face, and a completely different gait. More importantly, interior casino cameras clearly showed the girl interacting cheerfully with the group, with no signs of tension or coercion as described. The team immediately requested additional footage from areas where the girl appeared. Subsequent videos showed her using a casino membership card and presenting ID when required, meaning her identity could be confirmed. Later, with security's help checking entry logs, they confirmed she was a local who frequented the casino nearly weekly with the same group. These facts completely ruled out her being Emily. Concurrently with the camera review, the investigator met the witness again to clarify discrepancies in the description. The witness explained that it was dusk, with neon lights from shops reflecting, making it hard to see the girl's hair clearly. When shown stills from the casino cameras, he confirmed it was the same girl and admitted he may have misinterpreted her tense expression due to prior news about Emily's case. The investigator noted in the report that this was a case of misidentification due to media influence, a common phenomenon in high-profile missing persons cases. To ensure nothing was missed, the team continued checking the seaside area and nearby eateries, interviewing staff, and pulling footage from store cameras, but after nearly 3 hours, no additional individuals matching Emily appeared. By the end of the day, all data pointed to a clear conclusion: no evidence Emily had ever been in Atlantic City after disappearing. This lead was classified as false lead, unrelated, and officially removed from investigation directions. The thorough verification helped the team avoid wasting further resources on a dead end, while reaffirming that Emily's disappearance was likely not related to her voluntarily leaving town. The results of this false lead were filed with the note: no match in description, no additional image or witness evidence, false lead. After ruling out the Atlantic City lead and refocusing on more viable directions, the investigation team decided to closely examine Luis Navarro's 1998 dark gray Honda Civic. The vehicle 3 witnesses described as potentially matching the unfamiliar car seen in the Blue Star Diner parking lot when Emily left. Although there was no legal basis yet for a full search warrant, the LPD could conduct an exterior and basic interior inspection with the owner's consent, and Luis, in his second interview, agreed to allow investigators to look over the vehicle without opening the trunk or removing any parts. While limited in evidentiary value, this could still provide important indicators, especially since the disappearance was still fresh and any detail could become a breakthrough. The inspection took place in the parking lot next to Luis's home in Lakewood, where the Civic was parked in a fairly clean condition. The first thing that caught the team's attention was the vehicle's surface: the roof, windows, door handles, and body, all unusually clean, not just ordinarily so but appearing as if washed within the last 24 hours. The team asked Luis about this, and he replied that it was his habit to wash the car every weekend. However, checking his loyalty card at a nearby car wash showed his last visit was 2 weeks prior. This information was not conclusive, but sufficient for investigators to note in the report that the car had been cleaned near the time of the interview, an anomaly in a disappearance case when the vehicle owner had no specific reason to clean it immediately. When examining the exterior, investigators closely inspected areas prone to dirt or mud accumulation, such as wheel wells, undercarriage, and lower door sills. All were clean to the point of nearly no soil adherence, inconsistent with the wet weather and light rains in the previous 2 days. However, without a deep search warrant, the team could only note this without collecting samples. Inside the car, investigators checked the dashboard, front seats, back seats, floor mats, and glove compartment. The 1998 Civic's interior was already old, but lacked food crumbs, paper dust, or scattered personal items, quite rare for a daily driven car owned by a 22-year-old student. The back seat was unusually clean, no stray fibers, no dirt, no shoe marks or impressions from heavy objects. This led investigators to note that the car appeared cleaned more thoroughly than usual, though intent could not be concluded. When asked, Luis explained he had just given friends a ride to Atlantic City the previous weekend and cleaned it to make it nice, but timing evidence did not support this. The team continued checking areas likely to trap fibers, such as seat crevices and plastic between seats and doors, but without full forensic sampling kits, a common limitation in 2002 field investigations, they could not collect fiber samples for analysis or comparison. Additionally, investigators noticed the front passenger floor mat appeared newer than the vehicle's age and did not match the wear on the driver's side mat. When asked, Luis said he replaced it because the old one was torn. There was no immediate reason to doubt this, but the team noted it as an unverifiable detail on site. The door inspection revealed no signs of forced entry or fresh scratches, meaning if someone was placed in or removed from the car involuntarily, it left no obvious traces. This led the team to consider two possibilities: either no incident occurred in the car or any event, if it happened, occurred without significant disturbance. The team attempted to view the trunk, where traces are often most evident, but since there was no warrant and Luis refused to open it because of personal items, police had to stop there. This was a significant limitation, as the trunk is the most critical area in disappearance or assault cases. However, under 2002 legal standards, without direct probable cause, forced opening was not possible. After nearly an hour of inspection, the only conclusions the team could record were Luis's car was cleaner than reasonably expected. No fiber, soil, or physical evidence samples were obtained due to procedural limits and lack of a warrant. No signs of struggle or heavy transport in the rear seating area, trunk not inspected, and the exterior showed signs of possible recent washing near the interview time. Although there was no incriminating evidence, these details led the lead investigator to keep Luis in the monitor closely category, while acknowledging that legally, the 1998 Civic inspection yielded only indirect data insufficient to advance further in determining Luis's role in Emily's disappearance. 10 days after Emily Russo's disappearance, the entire initial investigative effort by the Lakewood Police Department had reached a clear deadlock. No physical evidence, no traces, no new witnesses, no cell phone signals, no video evidence, and even the 1998 Civic, belonging to Luis Navarro, the most promising lead, lacked sufficient data to expand into legal action. Key areas, such as the parking lot behind the diner, the edge of the Forest Avenue industrial area, the trail leading into Byrne State Forest, and the forest grid sections had all been searched 2 to 3 times by patrol teams, volunteers, rangers, and K-9 units, but the results were completely empty. All witness interview documents were cross-checked multiple times, yet no new details emerged. False leads like Atlantic City had consumed some resources, while the remaining directions, from cell phone data, vehicle checks, and alibi verifications, all yielded the same conclusion: insufficient basis to advance further. In the Day 10 summary meeting, the lead investigator had to report to the commander that there was no information of sufficient weight to shift the case from missing person status to a criminal investigation, even though the entire investigative team internally believed the likelihood of foul play was very high. However, the lack of physical data prevented them from recommending search warrants, requesting expanded scrutiny of related individuals, or formally opening a criminal investigation file under New Jersey's 2002 regulations. Given the limited resources of the LPD, only 3 investigators assigned full-time to the Emily case in the first week. The unit commander decided to begin scaling back personnel according to protocol when no new leads appeared after 7-10 days. 1 investigator was pulled back to handle property crimes in the area. 1 support investigator was reassigned to night patrol shifts, leaving only the lead investigator to continue monitoring the file on a part-time basis. The investigative team halted wide area searches, maintaining only surface check activities, light patrols around the diner area in the evenings to note if any drifting objects surfaced or if someone discarded related items. Efforts to check cameras from nearby businesses also hit a ceiling. Most 2002 cameras were analog types that overwrote tapes after 24 or 48 hours, so all footage from the night Emily disappeared had been erased before authorities could access it. The lead investigator submitted 2 additional requests to the cell provider for nearby signal triangulation, a very crude technique at the time, but received the same response. No additional information could be gathered beyond the provided call logs. Even inquiries about tower-to-tower handoff signals were not feasible because 2002 systems did not store them. Highway monitoring units, state police and gas stations along the Garden State Parkway were notified with Emily's photo, but none reported matching information. Meanwhile, Emily's motel room, where she lived with a roommate, had been checked twice, with no signs of struggle or missing belongings detected. Emily's purse remained in the locker at the diner. Her phone last pinged at 10:14 p.m. Her wallet was not found, but it was unclear if she had it with her or left it somewhere. In voluntary disappearance cases, victims often take certain personal items, but here the purse being left behind was an unusual sign, yet it was not enough to shift the file to criminal investigation due to the absence of accompanying evidence. On day 12, the unit commander made the official decision. Emily Russo's file was transferred to active to limited monitoring status, meaning passive oversight, with resources reactivated only upon new leads. This meant no more search teams, no expanded scene checks, no wide-scale witness interviews. Instead, the file was stored in the system with only the lead investigator monitoring it, periodically checking information from other agencies, like the DMV, cell providers, and reports from external units. Emily's family was informed of the investigation scaling back, but they were not provided details due to operational regulations. Regarding Luis Navarro, despite many details drawing the team's attention, the lack of direct traces forced them to halt deeper interrogation. The lead investigator placed Luis in the deferred check group, meaning he would be re-examined if new data emerged. Ultimately, the absence of physical evidence was the factor that caused the entire case to fall into deadlock. No fibers, no soil samples, no footprints, no dropped items, no camera footage, no location data, no traces indicating movement on foot or by vehicle. In the context of 2002 technology and the investigative capacity of a town like Lakewood, this was a situation that left the case almost completely stalled. Emily Russo's file was officially moved to the missing person, pending new lead list, ending the first active investigative phase without any significant progress. From 2003 to 2006, after Emily Russo's file had officially entered passive monitoring status, the Ocean County Forensic Unit continued to re-evaluate the samples collected in the initial phase, though both quantity and quality were very limited. This was procedural work, typically applied in prolonged missing persons cases, to ensure that if any details had been previously overlooked due to outdated technology, they could be detected as forensic equipment and processes improved over time. However, from the start of the review, technicians noted a clear reality: the samples obtained in the first 10 days of 2002 were too few, too scattered, and mostly did not meet standards for in-depth analysis. For hair samples, the initial team had not found any stranger hairs at the scene because no evidence was recovered from the parking lot, industrial edge, or within the Byrne State Forest area. All hair samples in the forensic file belonged to Blue Star Diner employees, who had been ruled out as suspects very early. Some hair samples collected from the cabin of Luis Navarro's 1998 Civic, gathered manually without a tight chain of custody, were deemed unsuitable for identification analysis due to contamination, lack of roots, or degradation during storage. Since in 2002, the LPD had no separate forensic lab and relied entirely on the county unit, improper sample storage meant that 2003 forensic experts could not extract usable DNA. Regarding fiber samples, the file showed only 3 collected in the initial phase, 1 from the Civic's back seat, 1 from the passenger floor mat, and 1 from the diner kitchen area. However, upon review, the forensic unit concluded that the back seat sample from the Civic was heavily contaminated and contained common synthetic fibers that could not be traced to any specific item. The passenger floor mat sample had fibers too similar in color to the mat itself, rendering analysis meaningless. The remaining sample from the diner kitchen was identified as fiber from employee uniforms, completely unrelated to Emily. This led to the conclusion that no fiber samples had sufficient forensic value for comparison with the victim's clothing or suspects. For footprints, the 2002 report clearly stated that the parking lot and industrial edge surfaces were too hard or too cluttered with vehicle and animal tracks, making actual footprint collection impossible. In the 2003 review, forensic experts could only examine scene photos, but these were taken with low-resolution film cameras, lacking detail for analyzing shoe sole patterns or stride length. Even when enlarged, the images were blurry and lacked reference points, making them unusable for comparison. This resulted in the footprints section of the Phase 1 forensic file being rated no analytical value. Additionally, items related to Emily's activities, such as the purse left in the locker, uniform, and work shoes, were re-examined, but since they were in spaces not directly related to the disappearance scene and showed no signs of disturbance or foreign material on the surface, technicians could not infer any new details from them. Another issue stalling the 2003-2006 forensic review was technological limitations at the time. DNA analysis was only viable with rooted hairs or sufficient cell quantities. Fibers, fabrics, or inorganic materials yielded no DNA. For camera images, 2003 enhancement technology was insufficient to recover details from low-quality analog tapes that had been rewound multiple times, causing partial image degradation. Moreover, digital storage was not yet common, so the forensic file only had printed copies, preventing clarity enhancements. Regarding chemical traces or materials on Luis's vehicle, since the initial team did not collect soil from the undercarriage or floor mats, there was no basis for comparison with soil from the forest edge or industrial area. Upon re-evaluation, experts simply noted that origin of dust or stains cannot be traced due to lack of original samples. This once again highlighted a major gap in scene collection protocols in the early 2000s at small police departments. Additionally, technicians reviewed a small stain on the Civic's door edge, noted in the 2002 file. However, the sample was not collected due to lack of standard procedure, and by 2003 only photos remained. Image analysis concluded the stain was too small and of no forensic value. In 2005 and 2006, as New Jersey's forensic technology began improving with more sensitive DNA analysis and FTIR for materials, the forensic unit reviewed Emily's file to assess potential for expanded analysis. The conclusion reached by late 2006 was no biological samples, organic materials, or forensic value items of sufficient quality for advanced analysis. All evidence fails preservation standards. This supplemental review officially confirmed that the initial forensic phase produced no progress, and for any breakthrough, the case would need new evidence, something no one at the time knew when it might appear. From 2007 to 2010, after Emily Russo's file had been inactive for over 5 years, the Ocean County Sheriff's Cold Case Unit began including the case in its periodic review list. A new process implemented when the unit was established and took over serious unresolved missing persons cases. Although there were no valuable forensic samples from the initial phase, the Cold Case Unit still determined that reanalyzing the entire timeline could reveal gaps in the original reasoning. Over 3 years, 2 experienced cold case investigators successively read through the entire file, search reports, witness statements, phone logs, vehicle inspection reports, scene diagrams, and Phase 1 forensic documents. They reconstructed a complete timeline with higher resolution, including over 80 time markers from 5 p.m. to the moment Emily's phone went off at 10:14 p.m. When analyzing the timeline, the Cold Case Unit identified a total of 8 plausible disappearance scenarios based on remaining data. Scenario 1, Emily was approached in the parking lot by a known individual, leading to unwilling movement within 2-3 minutes after exiting the diner's back door. Scenario 2, Emily voluntarily entered a vehicle she recognized, making the approach non-disruptive and consistent with no signs of struggle. Scenario 3, an unknown subject waited near the dark-colored vehicle area in the lot, approaching Emily in low light with no nearby witnesses. Scenario 4, Emily left the parking lot via a shortcut or side path toward the Forest Avenue industrial area, then encountered an incident or was forced to move. Scenario 5, Emily entered the dirt road bordering Byrne Forest, following the direction K9s once led, with the scent lost due to environmental factors. Scenario 6, a subject used a vehicle to remove Emily from the area within 2 minutes, leaving no prolonged scent trail, consistent with K9 data. Scenario 7, Emily left the parking lot then returned reflexively, leading to interaction outside witness observation range. Scenario 8, a composite scenario where the subject could be an acquaintance not in the initial suspect group due to lack of contact data. The Cold Case Unit rated likelihood on a 4-tier scale and determined scenarios 1, 3, and 6 had the highest weights because they aligned with the no witness, no noise principle. No witnesses, no sounds, no evidence, common in disappearances involving vehicle intervention. After analyzing the 8 scenarios, the Cold Case Unit moved to spatial evaluation. Based on 2002 scene maps, they identified 3 priority areas for potential research if resources allowed. Area 1 was the rear parking lot section where the dark vehicle appeared and where a witness saw a man standing beside a car. This was viewed as the likely initial contact point between Emily and any subject. Area 2 was the dirt road connecting the lot to the Forest Avenue industrial zone, where K9s led then lost the scent. This suggested it could be a transition point, though the 2002 search team found no traces. Area 3 was the edge of Byrne Forest, especially northeast entry grid cells with complex terrain and hard-to-access spots that the 2002 team could not thoroughly scan due to manpower and lighting shortages. The Cold Case Unit noted that initial search reports did not document checks of small pits, hollow tree bases, or eroded ground areas, points modern analysis considers essential in forest-related disappearances. However, despite identifying 3 priority areas, the Cold Case Unit could not launch new searches in 2007-2010 due to lack of dedicated resources for missing persons cases without clear criminal indicators. The Cold Case Unit at the time had only 2 full-time investigators handling over 40 backlogged files, mostly unsolved homicides or disappearances with criminal elements. Emily's case, though deemed serious, had no physical evidence to elevate priority. Moreover, large-scale forest searches required state or federal funding, which this case did not qualify for, lacking a nexus criminal linkage under then-current standards. Thus, the file was reviewed on paper only and updated in the system to await opportunities for new investigative directions if witnesses, reports, or evidence emerged. By late 2010, after completing 3 years of monitoring analysis, The cold case unit concluded that Emily Russo's disappearance could not progress due to data limitations and insufficient resources for research deployment. The file was stored under cold case, active monitoring, awaiting technological or circumstantial changes to enable further exploitation. When the cold case unit completed the file review phase and identified 3 areas for potential research if resources became available, the investigation team shifted to another item marked as medium priority, but with potential to break the case if exploited, retracking the dark charcoal 1998 Honda Civic owned by Luis Navarro at the time of Emily's disappearance. Although the 2002 vehicle examination yielded no significant results, and the trunk could not be opened due to lack of a search warrant, the cold case unit considered the Civic one of the most critical links because 3 witnesses all described a dark-colored vehicle appearing at the exact location and time Emily left the parking lot. In cases lacking physical evidence and location data, the means of transportation is often the key element to breaking through stalemates. Therefore, starting in 2008, the cold case unit began steps to trace the Civic's ownership history using DMV databases, vehicle registration records, and insurance reports in New Jersey. This could not be done in the initial phase of the case due to limited resources, but when the cold case review was launched, investigators recognized it as a necessary step to determine if the vehicle still existed or had changed owners. The DMV report showed that the 1998 Civic was registered in Luis Navarro's name from March 2001, about a year before Emily's disappearance. The registration history further recorded that the vehicle was transferred to a buyer in Toms River in August 2004. This prompted the cold case unit to expand the search scope, as an early ownership change after a disappearance is always a noteworthy factor, even if it cannot be considered evidence. Investigators attempted to contact the second owner, but the address listed in the DMV records no longer existed. The individual had moved out of state after 2006. When contacting the insurance company for archived information, they confirmed that the new owner's policy had terminated in 2009 after the Civic was involved in an accident and marked total loss, completely without usable value. Immediately, the cold case investigators submitted a request to the salvage yard listed in the insurance records. The salvage company confirmed they had taken possession of the Civic in March 2009, then crushed and compacted the frame as part of the metal recycling process. This meant the entire vehicle structure, including the passenger compartment, rear seats, trunk and interior components, locations that could have contained critical traces in a disappearance case, had been completely destroyed and no longer existed in any analyzable form. Upon receiving this confirmation, the investigator noted in the report one of the most significant conclusions of the entire 2007-2010 phase: vehicle of interest destroyed, no further forensic examination possible. The forensic technicians themselves confirmed that even if only a compacted frame remained, they could not recover or analyze any materials. No seats, no flooring, no trunk, no fabric samples or recoverable traces. Every opportunity to search for fibers, shoe prints, biological evidence, or soil from the scene had completely vanished. This had a major impact on the investigative strategy, as the Civic was one of the few leads the cold case unit hoped could be cross-referenced with the areas identified in the timeline analysis. The vehicle's destruction eliminated the possibility of finding evidence at the vehicular level, something often considered critically important in disappearances involving potential forced transport. The cold case unit also queried tow truck records, repair logs, and small garages around Toms River to check if, between 2004 and 2009, the Civic had been brought in for interior repairs or repainting, details that might suggest concealment of traces. However, records from small garages at that time were not digitized. Many owners had changed professions or closed, resulting in no findings from the repair history search. The DMV records provided only information on the ownership transfer and the vehicle's removal from the system after destruction. When the concluding report was compiled at the end of 2010, the cold case investigator clearly stated that all investigative leads related to the 1998 Civic were no longer viable. The vehicle could not be re-examined, analyzed, or traced for evidence, and if any proof had ever existed inside it, it had been completely destroyed during scrap processing. The disappearance of the Civic, one of the last possibilities to shed light on the events in Emily's final sighted moments, marked another link falling from the investigative chain. The cold case unit had to accept that, despite years of effort to track the vehicle, they had reached the end of this lead without obtaining any forensic data. This left the case continuing in a state of severe physical evidence deficiency, awaiting an external new factor to shift it from deadlock. From 2011 to 2016, the Emily Russo file entered a complete freeze phase, with no new witness reports, leads, or related physical evidence emerging. The destruction of Luis Navarro's 1998 Honda Civic in 2009 and its inability to yield forensic results eliminated one of the very few remaining investigative avenues, leaving the cold case unit with no operational justification to continue allocating resources to a case without any foothold. During these 6 years, Emily's file was not in the priority group, as the cold case unit had to focus on numerous unsolved homicides or disappearances with clear criminal elements, where the probability of obtaining evidence was higher and the chance of resolution more realistic. Per Ocean County's procedures, each cold case file underwent preliminary annual review to check for technological changes, new reports, or matches with other cases. However, across all 6 periodic reviews, Emily's file generated no new data. Phone records could not be updated because Emily's device had been completely off since 2002, and the carrier retained no further information over the years. Vehicle reports could not be supplemented because the related car had been scrapped. The original witnesses, including diner staff, pedestrians near the parking lot, and delivery drivers, did not recontact and provided no additional information during this period. There were no further misidentifications, nor reports of someone resembling Emily appearing in nearby towns. The file also did not connect to any other disappearances in the area. Another factor contributing to the freeze was that, although forensic technology advanced rapidly from 2011-2016, it could not be applied to Emily's case due to the lack of qualified samples for analysis. Hair samples without roots, contaminated fiber samples, low-quality scene photos, and no biological samples for DNA extraction. Even technologies like soil analysis, trace chemistry, or material comparison were infeasible without physical evidence to compare. The cold case unit classified the case as a missing person. No scene, meaning no clear crime scene, no objects, no struggle, no signs of transport, rendering all modern techniques inapplicable. Over these 6 years, community interest in Emily's disappearance also gradually waned, leading to fewer tip calls. The rare information sent to LPD was inaccurate or speculative. Emily's family maintained contact with police, but they understood there was no basis to expect a sudden change given the file's complete lack of data. By the end of 2016, the Emily Russo file remained in passive monitoring status, marked "No changes," awaiting new lead. This was the phase where the disappearance fell completely into stasis, with no significant investigative movement for over half a decade. In early May 2017, when the Emily Russo file had been dormant in passive monitoring for over 15 years, a completely unexpected situation occurred at Lakewood Industrial Park, about 4 miles from Blue Star Diner. A crew of construction workers from a local contractor, while excavating to expand the foundation for a new warehouse, discovered bone fragments mixed in soil at a depth of nearly 40 centimeters. Initially, they assumed they were animal bones, since the area had once been the edge of woods before being filled in. But an older worker with military experience noticed the unusually long bone structure and suspected they were human. After a few minutes of close observation, the crew immediately stopped the excavator and reported to the site supervisor. The supervisor quickly recognized the seriousness of the discovery and called 911, prompting the Lakewood Police Department to dispatch first responders to the scene. Upon arrival, police decided to seal off the entire excavation area, requiring workers to preserve the initial discovery position and not move anything further. The officer in charge of the shift quickly determined this was very likely a fully decomposed human skeleton buried for a long time, as the surrounding soil showed signs of years of compaction. LPD established a scene perimeter of nearly 30 square meters using yellow tape and markers while requiring the construction team to halt all activity. After the perimeter was set, the crime scene unit was called in to process according to skeletal excavation protocol, overall photography, marking each bone fragment's position, describing decomposition level, and noting environmental conditions at discovery. The initial bone fragments identified included femur, tibia, ribs, and part of the rear skull, scattered within a narrow area under soil that had been leveled in the early 2000s during industrial park expansion. Investigators noted this was very likely a shallow burial, as the overlying soil lacked natural stratification, indicating significant prior disturbance. This led LPD to immediately contact the cold case unit to check if any Lakewood disappearances matched the bone decomposition timeline. Concurrently, the forensic team continued expanding the excavation in a small grid pattern to avoid missing evidence. Within 2 hours, they discovered additional fragments of rotted fabric, but still recognizable as cotton polyester blend weave, likely part of clothing the victim wore at death. A small oxidized metal zipper was found near the femur area, along with 2 metal accessory pieces suspected to be from a belt or purse. All evidence was placed in specialized bags, labeled, and position-coded for later analysis. Notably, the metal items retained basic shape, indicating burial time not long enough for complete disintegration, consistent with over a decade. LPD also noted the surrounding soil had different coloration from natural ground, suggesting disturbance, possibly from concealment. By early afternoon, after completing foundational collection steps, LPD required workers to provide full details on excavation progress in the area, prior machinery positions, and any activities that might have affected the remains location. A preliminary site map was created for cross-referencing. When investigators reviewed expanded industrial park records, they discovered the bone discovery area was once wooded edge along a trail leading to Route 70. Matching the direction K9 units had followed in 2000, to tracing scent from Emily's belongings, though no evidence was found then, and the search could not pinpoint a stop. This discovery led LPD to believe the victim may have been brought to this area shortly after disappearance. Investigators continued manual excavation in an expanded radius for potential additional evidence, while checking soil below the bones for burial depth. During this, they found more small fabric pieces and a deformed metal snap. On-site forensics assessed these as likely accessories from a backpack or shoulder bag, the type commonly used by young people in 2002. Although identity could not be confirmed on-site, the investigation team recognized this discovery could resolve one of Lakewood's longest-standing missing persons cases. The bone fragments were then collected sufficiently for transfer to the Ocean County Forensic Lab, where anthropological examination would determine sex, estimated age, and relative time of death. All non-biological evidence was sealed and fully documented per protocol. The discovery of human remains in an area preliminarily searched in 2002 forced the entire cold case team to update the file, as this was the first definitive physical evidence in 15 years. Though no conclusions yet, the bone condition, fabric fragments, and burial location made investigators understand they were about to face an entirely new, more complex investigative direction, requiring re-examination of all old data at a higher level of detail than before. At the Ocean County Forensic Laboratory, the skeletal remains and evidence recovered from the Lakewood Industrial Park area were prioritized for processing in the first week of May 2017 at the urgent request of the LPD, marking the first comprehensive forensic analysis phase since 2002. Since most of the bones had decomposed and no soft tissue remained, the forensic team proceeded with standard anthropological procedures, assessing the skeletal framework, measuring morphological features, analyzing pelvic and cranial bone structures, long bone thickness, and degenerative factors to determine sex, age, and burial duration. Initial results indicated the skeleton belonged to a young female, aged 18-25, matching the age group of Emily Russo at the time of her disappearance. The bone condition revealed a decomposition process lasting over a decade, consistent with the time frame of Emily's disappearance in 2002. However, to confirm identity, the forensic team required deeper testing using mtDNA technology, mitochondrial DNA analysis, suitable for decomposed bone samples that still retained sufficient structure. They selected fragments from the tibia and femur, the least environmentally impacted bones, and sent the samples to New Jersey's contracted state laboratory, which had a high success rate in processing mtDNA from old skeletons. While awaiting DNA results, the forensic unit continued examining signs of trauma on the hyoid bone and cervical vertebrae. During cleaning of soil layers and using oblique lighting for observation, they discovered the hyoid bone had a compression fracture, characteristic commonly seen in cases of manual or ligature strangulation. The fracture patterns were not caused by mechanical impact from the excavator during the 2017 construction recovery, as the break structure indicated it occurred while soft tissue was still present, meaning at or near the time of death. Additionally, the upper cervical vertebrae showed abnormal axial displacement. The forensic team prepared a preliminary report, neck trauma likely related to cause of death, but could not reach a full conclusion until further analysis of the ribs' orbital sockets and microfractures on the jawbone. The fabric fragment recovered at the scene was also submitted for examination. Although the fibers had almost completely decayed, some structures remained sufficient to identify the material as a cotton-polyester blend, matching the type of uniform shirt Emily typically wore when leaving her shift at the Blue Star Diner. The zipper and metal accessory fragments were treated with mild chemical deoxidation to reveal engraved details. While the model was no longer clear, the zipper type matched popular women's handbags from the early 2000s in the Lakewood area. These elements were insufficient to confirm victim identity on their own, but contributed to supporting a connection to Emily's case. By mid-June 2017, the DNA laboratory sent the official report to Ocean County. mtDNA extracted from the femur matched the maternal DNA sample of Emily Russo, with a forensic standard error probability nearing 0. This was the conclusive identification. The skeleton was that of Emily Russo, missing since March 2002. After confirming identity, the forensic team shifted to evaluating cause of death. Based on the hyoid fracture, cervical vertebral displacement, bone preservation condition, and absence of sharp or blunt force trauma signs on other bone regions, the forensic report noted, death due to neck force application, highly suggestive of strangulation. They also used decomposition progression to estimate time of death within a few hours to at most 1 day after Emily was last seen at 22:10 on the night of disappearance. This ruled out the possibility of the victim surviving several days post-disappearance and reinforced the hypothesis that she was attacked immediately on the night she left the Blue Star Diner. Another factor considered was the skeletal distribution. The bones showed no significant scattering by wildlife, indicating the initial burial depth was sufficient to limit animal access. Surrounding soil layers exhibited artificial compaction, proving the area had been manually disturbed with digging tools before being overlaid with industrial fill during the 2003 industrial park development. The forensic team concluded the remains had been buried prior to site construction, meaning the victim was interred at the location shortly after death. Chemical soil analysis also revealed traces of rust and decomposing organic compounds, potentially matching soft material with a metal core used for strangulation, though not intact enough for confirmation. The final report to the LPD included 3 key conclusions. First, victim identity confirmed via mtDNA as Emily Russo. Second, cause of death, highly likely strangulation leading to asphyxia. Third, estimated time of death coinciding with the night of her 2002 disappearance. From these conclusions, the LPD immediately updated Emily's file from missing person, cold case to homicide investigation, shifting the entire investigative focus to identifying who transported Emily to the burial site and how the body was concealed before construction began. Determining strangulation as cause of death also eliminated old 2002 hypotheses that Emily might have had an accident or voluntarily left town, while strengthening scrutiny of individuals directly connected to her at the time she left the parking lot behind the Blue Star Diner. This was the first time in 15 years that the case had confirmed forensic grounds, laying the foundation for the entire subsequent investigation phase. Immediately after the 2017 forensic report confirmed Emily Russo's identity and cause of death, the LPD coordinated with the Cold Case Unit and Ocean County Forensic Team to implement the next step, reconstructing the burial scene to determine the method, timing, and possibility of transporting the body to the Lakewood Industrial Park area in 2002, when it was still the edge of a semi-natural forest strip. First, the crime scene technicians conducted a full site survey using next-generation laser mapping systems, employing 3D scanning equipment to record soil structure, stratigraphic cross-sections, and the original burial pit shape before disturbance from 2017 construction activities. From the scan data, experts created a three-dimensional model showing depth, slope, and compaction of soil around the remains. Simulation results revealed an irregular elliptical pit, approximately 120 by 70 centimeters in size, with an average depth of 45-55 centimeters, entirely consistent with shallow burial in a scenario where the perpetrator needed to quickly conceal the body without professional digging tools. The laser mapping model also showed the overlying soil layer lacked natural forest structure, instead bearing characteristics of industrial fill, meaning the burial layer existed at least 1 year before the 2003 industrial expansion project began. This critical detail narrowed the burial timeline to immediately after Emily's disappearance, ruling out the body being moved there years later. In addition to 3D scanning, Ocean County's soil analysis team collected multiple samples from different pit layers, covering soil, soil adjacent to bones, and natural bedrock soil. These were tested via soil chemistry and microbial analysis to determine organic decomposition rate, pH changes, mineral density, and metal traces. Soil dating results indicated the layer in direct contact with the victim's body had biological changes corresponding to decomposition starting in spring 2002, exactly when Emily disappeared. This layer also contained iron traces and small metal deposits, matching the metal accessories found with the skeleton, indicating the victim's belongings were buried together rather than removed. Another notable point was uneven compaction density near the bones, proving hasty manual burial rather than mechanical. Microscopic observation showed no evidence of multiple disturbances, meaning the burial involved digging, placing the body, and filling once only. While the soil analysis team worked, the cold case investigators focused on evaluating body transportation methods. With 2017 forensic data confirming death on the disappearance night or shortly after, investigators assumed transportation occurred within that night's window. This led to re-evaluating 2002 terrain. Using archived GIS maps and satellite imagery, they confirmed the industrial park area was then open land interspersed with brush, dirt trails, and no barriers. The most natural access was a small turnoff from Route 70, matching the direction the K9 unit had initially indicated in 2002 searches. From there, investigators modeled body transport via 3 possibilities: manual carrying, dragging, or vehicle. Based on burial depth and excavation scope, direct carrying was deemed more likely than dragging, as bones showed no prolonged friction scratches and surrounding soil lacked disturbance, trajectories indicative of heavy dragging. Vehicle transport was also considered, as the trail was wide enough for a small sedan. If the body was driven to the forest edge, then carried tens of meters, this fit the pit structure. From laser mapping, investigators calculated the distance the perpetrator carried the body from a potential vehicle stop to the burial site, estimated 18-25 meters. This was a distance an adult could cover in minutes without obstruction. Additionally, Soil analysis showed intermittent upper layer compaction consistent with human footprints, though insufficient for shoe pattern analysis. This reinforced the hypothesis of manual carrying and burial in darkness. The combined laser mapping, soil, transport model analysis was completed by late summer 2017, with 3 conclusions. The pit was dug in 2002, the body was brought via human strength, or small vehicle in one single instance, and the location matched the initial canine direction but evaded detection due to shallow yet sufficient depth to mask scent. These conclusions compelled investigators to re-examine the full list of individuals with opportunity to access Emily, nighttime mobility, and familiarity with 2002 Lakewood terrain, forming the basis for the next suspect screening phase. After completing the burial scene reconstruction via laser mapping and soil analysis by late 2017, the cold case team proceeded to the next step, fully reconstructing the timeline of the night Emily Russo disappeared in 2002, based on new forensic data from the remains and burial context. Combining the disappearance timeline with estimated time of death allowed elimination of many early hypotheses while returning certain individuals to central suspicion, particularly Luis Navarro, the last person recorded near Emily, in the parking lot. Key milestones were re-established chronologically. Emily left the Blue Star Diner at 22:10, seen by 2 witnesses walking with a man matching Luis's build. Her phone went completely offline shortly after, and per forensics, death occurred within a few hours of last contact. Based on the 2017 forensic report, investigators pinpointed time of death around 22:30 that night to 1 o'clock the next morning, aligning with the initial 12-hour missing person data. This alignment between death timing and last sighting eliminated 2002 hypotheses that the victim might have left Lakewood the next morning or been held for days before murder. This led to re-evaluating all witness statements, including co-workers, parking lot passers-by, and delivery drivers. These witnesses described Emily showing no signs of coercion in the initial minutes after leaving the diner, but no one saw her enter a vehicle or head in any direction. When the timeline was rebuilt using forensics, investigators hypothesized the victim was approached in the parking lot or en route to Forest Avenue, quickly subdued, and placed in a vehicle. Alignment between burial location and the 2002 K9 trail made small sedan transport more plausible, especially as the access road was wide enough for a Civic without excessive difficulty. The new timeline cross-referencing forced rescreening of all 2002 alibis. Many were quickly cleared via independent evidence, such as Mark Devlin, whose alibi matched and was re-verified in 2017 via archives. Others previously deemed unrelated due to lack of forensic evidence were now excluded because death timing too closely matched disappearance, ruling out prolonged interaction or interstate movement. Hypotheses of voluntary departure, accident, or out-of-state relocation were fully eliminated. With the narrowed suspect list, investigators refocused on those in contact during her final hours. From this, only 3 lacked strong alibis, but 2 were not in the parking lot or mismatched witness descriptions. Only Luis Navarro, previously suspected but lacking evidence, fit the final contact position, was present in the area, and had given slightly contradictory statements about leaving the lot. The team reanalyzed inconsistencies in Luis's 2002 statement. He claimed only happening to pass by and not speaking to Emily, while 2 witnesses described the man near her as matching Luis's build, height, and gait. At the time, limited samples and forensic technology prevented deep confrontation. But with the 2017 report indicating death 2-3 hours after last sighting, Luis's claim of leaving shortly after 22 o'clock no longer held. The nearly 90-minute unaccounted window that night became the new focus for forensic timeline comparison. Concurrently, Luis's 1998 Civic being destroyed in 2009 prevented direct vehicle evidence, but 2017 forensics showed transport via small vehicle or manual carry from a stop point into the forest edge. Based on this, the 98 Civic, small and trail-capable, remained consistent with the transport scenario. This did not prove Lewis guilty, but repositioned him centrally for forensic-based timeline evaluation. When the new timeline connected forensics, statements, human movement, and 2002 terrain conditions, the team reached an internal conclusion: Luis Navarro required re-interview as a primary suspect. Returning to old statements and cross-referencing with 2017 forensic data was the necessary preparation before expanding to subsequent investigative rounds. When the 2002 timeline was reconstructed based on the 2017 forensic data and Luis Navarro was brought back into the central suspect position, the LPD decided to summon him to headquarters for another interview. This time, with the goal of directly comparing his old statements with the new forensic results. The interview took place in a standard interrogation room, fully audio and video recorded in accordance with regulation. From the very first minutes, the investigator noticed a clear difference between his demeanor in 2002 and now. Luis appeared tense, avoided eye contact, and repeatedly asked to be told the specific reason for the session. When questioned again about the night Emily left the Blue Star Diner and the moment he appeared in the parking lot, Luis immediately gave a version different from his 2002 statement. Previously, he had said he was just passing through to get something from his car and did not stand near Emily for more than a few seconds, but in the 2017 statement, Luis shifted to saying that he might have stood there a little longer because he was looking for his keys and that he didn't clearly remember whether they spoke or not. This change prompted the investigator to ask for clarification on the exact position where Luis was standing at that moment, and he continued to adjust details, saying he was definitely at the far end of the lot, whereas the 2002 witness described the man standing close to the row of taillights where Emily was checking her purse before leaving the diner. The investigator directly confronted him with his old statement. Luis had previously claimed he left the parking lot before 22:05, but in the new statement, he said he might have left around 22:20 or later because he wasn't paying attention to the time. This discrepancy aligned with the time window the forensics identified as the period when the victim could have been attacked, making the change in his statement particularly noteworthy. When asked about the two witnesses who identified a man with a similar build standing next to Emily, Luis reacted slowly, then said that it could have been someone who looked like him and that he didn't remember anyone else in the lot. However, the movement map of diner employees and customers at that time showed very few people present besides Emily and the witness's description of a young man of average build, a description that matched Luis in 2002. Throughout the interview, the investigator also noted nonverbal behavior. Luis repeatedly clenched his fists, shifted positions, touched his collar, and avoided answering questions that required precise descriptions of timing. Additionally, when asked why in 2002, he had firmly stated that he had no contact with Emily in the week before she went missing, Luis appeared flustered before saying he didn't remember exactly. Even though the phone records from that year showed a short call from Luis's number to Emily on the afternoon of the day she disappeared, a call he had previously claimed was a wrong number. The investigator also asked him to explain why in 2002 he denied standing close to Emily, but now said he might have stood closer than he previously remembered. Luis replied that he was young and panicked back then, but this explanation did not match his relatively calm demeanor in the original statement. When asked about his vehicle in 2002, Luis confirmed owning a 1998 Honda Civic, but did not mention having sold it in 2004, as recorded in DMV records, forcing the investigator to show him the documents. Luis admitted it but said he didn't remember the exact timing of the sale, despite the DMV having specific transaction history. This inconsistency became even more suspicious when the 2017 forensics indicated the possibility that the body was transported in a small sedan to the wooded area near Industrial Park. Furthermore, when the investigator asked Luis to describe again the road he took leaving the diner that night, he gave a completely different description from 2002. Instead of going straight onto Route 9 as in his original statement, he said he looped around the back to avoid traffic. However, there was no traffic that night, and going around the back would have taken him directly toward the route leading to Industrial Park, matching the direction the K9 unit had identified. When pressed further on why he changed his route, Luis said he took a wrong turn, but could not describe the specific wrong segment. The interview revealed numerous clear inconsistencies: the time he left the parking lot, the degree of contact with Emily, his standing position, his travel route, and the status of the Civic. The investigators' report noted that Luis changed details to make them more vague, and frequently said he didn't clearly remember, despite having given definitive answers in 2002. His evasive responses, increasing tension over time, and defensive reactions to questions about the parking lot were assessed as abnormal according to behavioral evaluation standards in investigative interviews. The final interview report concluded that Luis's 2017 statement contained significant contradictions compared to his 2002 statement, was inconsistent with the forensic data, and heightened suspicion about his role on the night Emily disappeared, making his placement in the central suspect group a clear and justified professional requirement. Following the 2017 interview with Luis Navarro, in which he changed many key details compared to his 2002 statement, the cold case team shifted to an additional forensic analysis branch, fiber and soil matching, to determine whether the evidence recovered from the burial pit had any indirect connection to the vehicle once owned by Luis or to areas he frequented in the period before Emily disappeared. Since the 1998 Honda Civic had been destroyed in an accident in 2009, investigators could not take samples directly from the actual vehicle. Instead, they contacted Honda North America's archives and an automotive interior materials research center to obtain standard samples from the same 1998 Civic production batch. Seat upholstery fabric, floor mats, soundproofing material under the rear seat, and door panel felt. The forensics lab analyzed the remaining microfibers on the fabric fragments recovered with the remains, using Raman spectroscopy and comparing polymer structures under an electron microscope. Among the degraded fibers, there were 3 dark gray microfibers and 1 thin black microfiber of the polyethylene terephthalate type, matching the fiber used in the floor mats of the 1998 Civic. However, the conclusion noted that this match was not confirmatory because many vehicles from the same era used similar fibers. Nevertheless, the distinctive graphite charcoal color and 17-19 micron size of the sample fibers matched almost perfectly with the Honda-provided standards, providing a basis to assess that the likelihood of these microfibers coming from a late 1990 Civic was high. The next matching was performed on residual cotton polyester microfibers on the clothing fragment recovered from the burial pit. Some fibers adhered to soil carrying distinctive reddish-brown dust particles from the rear parking area of the Blue Star Diner. This was consistent with the assessment that the victim had contact with the ground or pavement immediately before being moved from the lot. When combined with the forensic model indicating the body was transported by vehicle or carried a short distance before burial, the team focused on the possibility that the body was placed in the trunk or rear seat of a vehicle. Although there was no actual vehicle for comparison, standard fiber samples from the Civic seats and floor mats were cross-checked against the fibers adhering to the clothing fragment. The results showed a relatively high match in color structure and polyester-cotton ratio, but forensics clearly stated that microfibers alone could not identify a specific vehicle. Concurrent with the fiber analysis, the lab conducted soil matching from the victim's clothing and from the soil adhered to recovered metal accessories against soil from areas where Luis commonly parked in 2002. Based on employee records and coworker statements at the Blue Star Diner, Luis usually parked his Civic in the lot behind the frozen food section, where the ground had distinctive reddish-brown soil mixed with fine sand and crushed gravel from resurfacing in 2001. Standard soil samples from that area were recollected in 2017, despite changes over time. Under microscopic examination, the soil from that location had high proportions of abraded quartz grains and iron oxide, characteristics rare in surrounding Lakewood lots. The soil adhered to the metal accessory fragment found in the burial pit also had a similar iron oxide ratio, though slightly altered due to over a decade underground. Notably, in one soil sample from the collar area still attached to the shoulder bone, the lab detected gravel particles with color and size matching the gravel spread behind the frozen section at the Blue Star Diner in 2001, per the owner's resurfacing records. This was not sufficient to conclude the victim was attacked exactly where Louise parked, but it created a significant point of contact between the soil on the victim's clothing and the environment Louise frequently accessed in the period before Emily disappeared. When the cold case team compiled the fiber and soil matching report, they assessed that the results remained indirect but had clear directional value. The fibers suggested the victim had contact with interior materials from a 1998 Civic line. The soil match indicated the victim carried soil particles originating from the area where Louise commonly parked. Combined with the forensic timeline and the series of contradictions in Louise's 2017 statement, the team noted that these new forensic results continued to strengthen suspicion toward Luis Navarro as the last person in contact and as potentially directly involved in the process of the victim being subdued and transported from the parking lot that night in 2002. While the investigative team was compiling the fiber and soil analysis results, a completely unexpected development occurred at the end of 2017, when a witness who had worked the evening shift at the Blue Star Diner in 2002 voluntarily returned to the Lakewood Police Department to provide new testimony after reading news about the discovery of Emily Russo's remains. This witness, who had left Lakewood in 2005 and now lived in Pennsylvania, said that seeing the news made her unable to sleep because of a detail she had overlooked for 15 years, partly because she thought it was unimportant and partly because she was too young at the time and feared getting drawn into the investigation. According to her 2017 statement, the witness clearly recalled that on the night Emily finished her shift, as she herself was leaving the kitchen and heading to the rear parking lot, she inadvertently saw Emily walking toward a dark-colored sedan parked about 2 rows away from the back door. What caught her attention at the time was that the sedan's position was not a regular customer spot, but an area rarely used by employees. When the investigator asked why she had not mentioned this detail in 2002, the witness said that when police approached her back then, she focused only on shift end times and Emily's condition, not thinking about the car. Moreover, she remembered leaving the lot quickly to catch her bus and not wanting to be detained longer. Most importantly, in the new statement, the witness asserted that the sedan Emily walked into was almost certainly Luis Navarro's dark gray Civic because she was very familiar with that car. Luis often parked it in the employee lot whenever he came to see Emily or eat dinner. The witness described the body shape, paint color, taillight position, and even a scratch on the rear bumper, details that matched the description of the 1998 Civic in the 2002 DMV records. She said the distance was not too far, and she clearly saw Emily open the passenger door and get in, before the car drove off toward Forest Avenue. When cross-referencing with the witness's original 2002 statement, the team found she had not mentioned Emily getting into any vehicle at all, only that she saw Emily walk to the lot and check her bag. This omission meant the 2002 investigation never considered the possibility that the victim voluntarily got into someone's car, but with the 2017 statement, the hypothesis that the victim left the lot with Luis became much clearer. The investigator asked the witness to describe the lighting and visibility at the time of observation. She clearly replied that the security lights behind the diner were quite bright, shining directly on the parked car's position, so she could see the movement of the two people. Although she could not see faces or hear words, she confirmed there were no signs of coercion in those initial seconds. The witness's confirmation that Emily voluntarily entered the car aligned with the forensic model that the victim may have been subdued only after getting inside the vehicle, before being taken to the wooded area near Industrial Park. This new statement also helped solidify the time Emily left the lot, most likely 22:12 to 22:15, matching the forensic timeline for time of death. When cross-referencing this statement with Lewis's 2002 statement, the team immediately identified a serious contradiction. Lewis had said he left the lot at 22 o'clock and did not see Emily after her shift. whereas the new witness confirmed seeing Emily get into his car about 10-15 minutes later. Additionally, the direction the Civic took onto Forest Avenue matched the path the K-9 team had tracked in 2002. Although it could not be confirmed whether the car went into Industrial Park that night, the witness noted that it turned in the only direction leading to Route 70, the very route forensics confirmed as the most logical approach to the burial location. The investigators noted that this testimony not only reinforced the timeline, but also provided the first direct witness confirmation that Emily got into Luis's car, something no one had mentioned in 15 years. Although the reliability of memory after many years needed verification, the team assessed that the statement was consistent with all the forensic data, soil match, fibers, and contradictions in Luis's 2017 interview. This strengthened the linkage between the circumstantial evidence and supported the scenario that the victim left the lot with someone she knew, then was attacked shortly afterward. The witness was recorded as the most important new source of information since the case was reopened, and her statement became a central part of reconstructing the timeline for the night Emily disappeared. After the new statement from the diner witness was recorded and its basic credibility established, the cold case investigation team decided to organize a third interrogation with Luis Navarro, this time shifting from an information-gathering approach to the timeline collapse tactic, a method designed to pressure the suspect into a state where he could no longer maintain two contradictory timelines and would be forced to choose one, either deny everything or admit part of it. The interrogation was arranged in the dedicated interview room at the LPD, with two lead investigators directly participating, one supervising investigator observing through one-way glass, and full recording equipment in place. As soon as Luis was brought into the room, he displayed clear defensiveness, trying to control his breathing, and repeatedly asking whether he was being accused of anything, indicating a level of stress higher than during the 2017 interrogation. The investigators began by asking Luis to reconfirm his entire timeline from the 2017 statement. He left the parking lot before 22:20, did not speak to Emily, did not give her a ride, did not leave the diner with her, and had no contact with her that night. After Luis confirmed this, the investigators immediately posed a series of questions to lock in the timeline, including which exact spot he left from, which direction he drove, how long it took to get home, and whether he stopped anywhere along the way. Luis replied that he left the parking lot around 22:15 to 22:20, drove straight toward Route 9, and got home within 10 minutes. Emphasizing that he did not see Emily after her shift ended. As soon as Luis gave these answers, the investigators moved to the timeline collapse phase by introducing the first piece of circumstantial evidence, the 2017 diner witness statement. Without naming the witness to avoid influence, the investigators clearly stated that someone had confirmed seeing Emily get into a dark-colored Civic parked in the exact spot where Luis usually parked, and that the car left the lot between 22:12 to 22:15. Luis immediately pushed back, saying the witness must have seen wrong or remembered incorrectly. But when asked to explain how the witness accurately described the color, model, and parking spot of his 2002 vehicle, Luis hesitated and then shifted to arguing that it was too long ago to remember who parked where. The investigators intensified the timeline collapse tactic by presenting a series of forensic markers, estimated time of death between 22:30, 1 o'clock, burial location, consistent with the route leaving the diner toward Forest Avenue, and soil matches from the victim's clothing, matching the employee parking lot where Luis usually parked. As these markers were presented consecutively, Luis began changing his statement with each question. Initially, he firmly denied leaving the parking lot with Emily, but after a few minutes of pressure from the forensic data, he shifted to saying, "Maybe our timings overlapped without me noticing." This prompted the investigators to ask, "Did you see Emily that night?" Luis evaded but eventually said, "I saw her walking to the lot, but I didn't get close." This contradiction marked the first breakdown in Luis's timeline version. When the investigators pressed further, "Did you open the car door for Emily?" Luis reacted strongly, saying, "No, "I didn't do anything." But he could not maintain consistency when questioned about the scratch on the rear bumper, a scratch the witness described as matching his Civic. Luis replied that he didn't remember having that scratch, contradicting the 2002 DMV records that noted the car had rear-end scratches when he submitted it for inspection. The ongoing contradictions led the investigators to move to the second phase of timeline collapse, reconstructing the route Luis described in 2002 and comparing it to the one he described in 2017. When asked to describe his route that night again, Luis said he went straight to Route 9. The investigators immediately displayed a wall-projected map showing that to reach Route 9 from his parking spot, Luis would have to pass through the exact area where the witness saw the Civic leave. When asked, "Did you drive through this area?" Luis answered, "Maybe," then minutes later, "I don't remember," and then shifted to probably yes. Within 10 minutes, he changed his answer 3 times, completely shattering the coherence of his timeline. The investigators continued pressing, "If you left the lot at 22:15 and got home in 10 minutes, why did neighbors report not seeing your car in your apartment parking spot until after 23 o'clock? Luis fell silent, then said, "I don't remember that night." Whereas in 2002, he had insisted he went straight home. This contradiction was considered serious because neighbors at the apartment complex had previously stated that Luis's car was absent between 23 o'clock. Data the investigation team had not deeply explored in the initial phase. As the interrogation continued, the investigators introduced the additional soil match factor, asking Luis if he had ever driven into the wooded area near Industrial Park. Luis denied it, but when asked about using the trail branching off Forest Avenue into that area, information obtained from an old friend in 2002, Luis changed his answer, saying he had gone there a few times to hang out with friends. This response completely contradicted his initial statement that he had never been in that wooded area. At this point, Luis's entire timeline had collapsed. The departure time from the lot no longer matched. The travel route changed repeatedly, the arrival time home did not align with neighbor statements, and his denial of encountering Emily was no longer sustainable, given the witness's direct description of her getting into his car. The investigators documented that Luis could not maintain a consistent timeline, changed answers when confronted with objective data, and showed signs of concealing information directly related to the night the victim disappeared. Toward the end of the interrogation, Luis shifted to a state of extreme stress, with slightly trembling hands, rapid breathing, and repeatedly requesting a break. The investigation team concluded that the level of contradictions in Luis's statements had exceeded normal behavioral thresholds and was sufficient to regard him as a genuine criminal suspect, no longer merely the last person in contact. These findings became a critical foundation for the investigation team to move to the next phase of the case. Following the third interrogation, in which Luis Navarro repeatedly contradicted himself and could not maintain any consistent timeline version, the cold case investigation team moved to the phase of synthesizing all data to form an official investigative conclusion. This process involved parallel analysis of 3 main data groups: forensic, timeline, and witness statements, aimed at clearly determining the chain of actions leading to Emily Russo's death and the disposal of her body in 2002. The forensic group provided the most critical foundation. Mock DNA confirmed the recovered remains were Emily's cause of death was strangulation leading to asphyxiation. Time of death fell between 22:30, 1 o'clock on the same night Emily disappeared. The grave showed signs of being dug manually in a very short time after death occurred. Soil inside the grave matched the employee parking lot behind the diner and the route leading to the forest edge. Fibers on the clothing and evidence items had characteristics consistent with the interior of a 1998 Civic. Combined, forensics painted a consistent picture. Emily was attacked on the night she left the diner, her body was transported to the wooded area bordering Industrial Park, and buried hastily within the first few hours after death. The timeline group then reconstructed the movements of involved individuals on the 2002 night. Emily was last seen at 2210. The 2017 witness confirmed she got into a dark Civic matching Lewis's, leaving the lot between 2212 and 2215. Emily's phone went offline shortly after. Forensics confirmed death the same night. The route the Civic took, according to the witness, led directly toward the path forensics identified as the access to the burial area. Lewis, meanwhile, could not provide a stable account of his departure time from the lot, could not explain the gap from 22:15 to 23 o'clock, and repeatedly changed details of his route when confronted. When comparing the timelines from his 2002, 2017, and 3rd 2017 statements, the investigation team noted Lewis changed at least 8 key time markers, including departure from the diner, arrival home, direction of travel, and the situation in the parking lot. The witness group provided the final piece. 2002 statements confirmed a young man standing near Emily. 2 witnesses described build and height closely matching Lewis. The new 2017 statement confirmed Emily voluntarily got into Lewis's car. Neighbor witnesses confirmed Lewis's car was not home at the time he claimed to have arrived. An old friend of Lewis confirmed he had used the trail leading to the wooded area near Industrial Park. Information Lewis denied in initial interrogations, but admitted under timeline collapse pressure. When synthesizing forensic plus timeline plus witness data, the investigative model formed a highly interconnected chain of actions. Lewis encountered Emily in the parking lot after her shift. She got into his car without apparent coercion. The car left the lot within the time frame, matching the death window. Emily was strangled between leaving the diner and early morning. The body was transported in a vehicle with interior and carpet characteristics, matching 1998. Civic fiber evidence. The body was buried in a wooded area only dozens of meters from the route leading to Industrial Park, consistent with one adult carrying the body over this terrain. Soil at the grave matched the distinctive soil of the area where Lewis usually parked. The body's decomposition timeframe and soil structure proved the grave was dug immediately after Emily's death, ruling out the possibility of another perpetrator bringing the body there years later. The investigation team also considered the possibility of a second perpetrator or group action, but forensics showed no evidence of multi-directional struggle or burial structure indicating multiple participants. The transport and burial model fit a lone actor. When analyzing Lewis's behavior across the 3 interrogations, investigators noted characteristics: evading questions when mentioning the Civic, changing statements when confronted with new witness data, physical stress reactions when asked about the route branching to the woods, and multiple "I don't remember" responses to details he had answered clearly in 2002. All were assessed as defensive behaviors typically seen in individuals directly involved in the crime events. The investigation team established the professional conclusion based on the complete alignment between forensic data, witness statements, environmental traces, and the contradictions in the suspect's accounts. The actions causing Emily Russo's death and the subsequent concealment and burial of her body can be attributed to a single individual present in the parking lot with the victim and driving the Civic that left that night. Data that matches only Lewis Navarro. From this, the investigation team completed the investigative conclusion report, determining the 2002 incident to be murder by strangulation, followed by concealment and burial of the body in the wooded area bordering Industrial Park, with Lewis Navarro having sufficient grounds for criminal suspicion to proceed to the next phase of the case. After the investigative conclusion report was completed, the Lakewood Police Department coordinated with the Pennsylvania State Police and the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office to obtain an arrest warrant for Lewis Navarro based on the established criminal suspicion grounds from forensic timeline and witness evidence. The warrant was approved by the court in under 48 hours, with execution jurisdiction covering both New Jersey and Pennsylvania, since Lewis had relocated to the town of Reading in 2012. The tactical team was deployed early in the morning, with support from a special investigation unit to ensure the arrest process was safe and without prior alert to the suspect. Lewis was intercepted in the apartment complex parking lot as he started his newly purchased 2016 sedan to head to work. He appeared surprised, asking what's going on, but when informed of the arrest warrant in connection with Emily Russo's death, Lewis froze, looked down at the car floor, and made no further response. After being handcuffed and read his Miranda rights, Lewis was transported to the Pennsylvania State Police Station for temporary detention pending transfer back to New Jersey. Simultaneously with the arrest, search warrants for Lewis's residence and vehicle were executed. His two-bedroom apartment on the third floor of the complex was sealed immediately after he was removed. The search team promptly began the process of seizing electronic documents and potential evidence: laptop, external hard drives, phones, personal documents, boxes under the bed, and storage containers in the closet. Lewis's laptop, a 2015 model, was seized while still warm, indicating recent use before he left home. In Lewis's work bag, investigators found old paperwork, including bills, copies of rental agreements from various addresses, and notably an unsealed envelope containing a folded paper map of Lakewood and Manchester Township, the common printed type from the early 2000s before widespread GPS use. Upon opening the envelope, investigators discovered faint blue ballpoint pen circles on the map, including the route from Blue Star Diner to the trail leading to the wooded area bordering Industrial Park, precisely where Emily's remains were found. Although the timing of the pen marks could not be determined, the existence of this map among Lewis's personal papers was sufficient for the investigation team to seize and seal it under the search warrant. In Lewis's closet, the search team recovered an old cardboard box containing documents from 2000-2004, including a copy of the registration for his 1998 Honda Civic, repair receipts, and some personal notes. All were placed in separate evidence bags to prevent cross-contamination. Forensic technicians paid special attention to a small notebook in which Lewis had recorded his 2002 work schedule. The notebook had a page torn out in the middle of March, the time Emily disappeared. Although the content of the missing page could not be inferred, investigators noted this detail for comparison with remaining handwriting traces. In the apartment, the search team also seized several items potentially containing digital information, such as USB drives, old memory cards, the Wi-Fi router, and an old mobile phone found in a kitchen drawer. All devices were sealed according to standards for transfer to the digital forensics lab. Additionally, a bag of old clothing and shoes was seized for potential soil and fiber comparison with case evidence, though the likelihood of matches was low due to the elapsed time. When opening the trunk of Lewis's new sedan, the search team found no direct traces related to the case, but still seized two other old maps in the glove compartment, considered unusual for someone who regularly used a smartphone. All evidence items were transported back to Lakewood for cataloging and analysis. Meanwhile, Lewis was transferred back to LPD that same afternoon, escorted by two officers with support from an investigator to ensure no unauthorized communication. The arrest of Lewis and the seizure of documents marked the first time in 15 years that the investigation team obtained new physical evidence directly from the suspect, providing a foundation for subsequent analysis steps and strengthening the entire reinvestigated process built on forensic and witness evidence. After Luis Navarro's arrest and the seizure of all documents, electronic devices, paper maps, and old papers pursuant to the search warrant, the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office immediately moved into the prosecution preparation phase, focusing on categorizing all the evidence collected during the 2017 reinvestigation process and building a robust argumentative structure capable of holding up in court, despite the case having occurred more than 15 years prior to the present time and lacking direct physical evidence from the suspect's original vehicle. The lead prosecutor responsible for the case, who had experience with complex cold cases, began by dividing the data into four groups: forensic, timeline, witnesses, and supplemental documents. The forensic group was considered the cornerstone, including mtDNA confirming Emily Russo's identity, the conclusion that the cause of death was strangulation, The burial pit structure and soil dating consistent with the time of death. Microfibers with characteristics matching the interior of a 1998 Civic. Soil on accessory fragments matching the parking lot where Luis commonly parked his car in 2002, and the laser mapping report showing the burial pit was dug immediately after the time of death. The prosecutor requested that the forensics department prepare a detailed table interpreting the degree of linkage between each type of evidence and the suspect's actions, particularly emphasizing how the forensics eliminated all hypotheses that the victim died after a prolonged period of disappearance or was moved multiple times before burial. The timeline group was built based on reconstructing the complete movements of Emily and Luis on the night in 2002, cross-referencing the suspect's statements over the years with objective evidence. The prosecutor focused on key points. Emily left the diner at 22:10. A witness confirmed she entered Luis's vehicle around 22:12, 22:15. The phone was turned off at 22:14. Forensics determined death occurred on the same night. The direction the vehicle left the parking lot matched the route leading to the forest where the body was found, and Luis's unaccounted for time from 22:15, 23 o'clock, could not be reasonably explained. To strengthen it, the prosecutor requested that the investigation team present the 2002 statement, the 2017 statement, and the third 2017 statement from Luis in a side-by-side 3-column comparison table, with each contradiction highlighted in color for easy presentation in court. The witness group included direct and indirect statements, the 2017 diner witness confirming Emily entered Luis's vehicle, the 2002 witness describing a man standing next to Emily with a build matching Luis, the apartment complex witness confirming Luis's vehicle was not present at his residence during the time he claimed to have gone home, and an old friend witness confirming Luis had previously used the trail leading into the forest adjacent to the industrial park. The prosecutor evaluated the 2017 diner witness statement as the pivotal turning point because it provided the first direct link between Emily and Luis's vehicle, a critical piece missing for the previous 15 years. Regarding the supplemental documents group, the prosecutor reviewed all seized items from Luis's apartment and new vehicle, paper maps with circled routes toward the burial area, documents related to the 1998 Civic, a notebook with a page torn out corresponding to the time of Emily's disappearance, electronic devices requiring data extraction, and personal documents that could help determine Luis's psychological state or schedule around 2002. Although these documents were only circumstantial, the prosecutor assessed that when placed within the forensic plus timeline narrative, they could be used to bolster the argument regarding the suspect's level of preparation or concealment. Once categorization was complete, the prosecutor began constructing the main argument in a logical sequence. First, proving Emily entered Luis's vehicle based on the diner witness and timeline. Second, proving Emily died shortly after leaving the parking lot based on forensics. Third, proving the body was transported in a small vehicle consistent with a 1998 Civic. Fourth, proving the body was buried in an area Luis was familiar with and had previously accessed. Fifth, proving Luis could not maintain consistent statements, changing the timeline multiple times when confronted. Sixth, establishing exclusivity, eliminating all other suspects based on alibis and forensics, and finally, establishing Luis's act of murder and body disposal as a solitary act without involvement from others. The prosecutor placed special emphasis on presenting the forensics as a continuous logical chain, avoiding reliance on any single piece of evidence and focusing on the overall combination. Soil match, microfibers, laser mapping, autopsy forensics, disappearance timeline, and witness statements must form a tightly interconnected evidence network where each detail supports the others. Additionally, the prosecutor prepared counter-arguments to potential defense strategies. Witness memory accuracy diminished after 15 years, lack of direct evidence from the Civic vehicle, and the possibility of cross-contaminated soil. To counter these, The prosecutor planned to emphasize that witness statements aligned perfectly with forensics and the timeline, while the microfibers and soil served only as supporting evidence rather than the sole proof. The prosecutor also requested that the forensics department prepare expert testimony for court to explain why the case, despite lacking original physical evidence, could still be established based on modern forensics and the 2017 burial site reconstruction methods. Ultimately, the draft indictment was prepared under New Jersey charges, first-degree murder and tampering with a corpse, accompanied by a full explanation based on the aforementioned evidence chain. This was the final completion step before the case moved to the next phase in the criminal proceedings. At the criminal trial, held at the Ocean County Superior Court, the presentation of forensic evidence became the focus of the third day of trial, where the prosecutor concentrated on proving the mechanical mechanism causing Emily Russo's death and comparing seized physical evidence with the capability to move, transport, and conceal the body using a vehicle formerly owned by Luis Navarro. Before the jury, the Ocean County forensic pathologist was called first to explain in detail the injuries to the neck area, particularly the hyoid bone and cervical vertebrae C2, C3, two bone structures key to determining the cause of death. Based on imaging, technical descriptions, and written reports, the expert affirmed that Emily's hyoid bone had a compression fracture with two symmetrical horizontal breakpoints, consistent with strangulation by hand force or a soft object with a large contact area, rather than impact from collision or mechanical compression. He explained that a hyoid bone fracture is an extremely characteristic indicator in strangulation cases, occurring when strong pressure on the front of the neck pushes the hyoid bone backward and traps it between muscle, ligament structures. This causes soft tissue hypoxia rapidly, leading to loss of consciousness within 10-20 seconds and death in just a few minutes if the force is not released. The expert further described that a hyoid bone fracture could not occur due to decomposition, could not be caused by animal damage, and was not due to the excavator at the construction site, because the fracture exhibited perimortem characteristics, meaning the bone broke while soft tissues still had elasticity and the bone retained moisture, completely different from post-mortem fractures or fractures due to mechanical pressure after decades of burial. In addition to the hyoid bone, the forensic pathologist presented microfractures in the upper cervical vertebrae, particularly C2 and C3, where slight axial displacement was noted, a sign commonly seen when the victim is pulled or twisted during restraint. The soil layer adhering to the bones was also analyzed to confirm the body had not been moved multiple times before burial. According to the soil forensics expert's explanation, the soil stratification at the scene showed the burial pit was dug only once, with no signs of reopening, reburial, or later body displacement. This reinforced the argument that the victim was killed and buried in very close temporal proximity. The forensic pathologist continued by presenting the death timeline based on bone decomposition levels, mineralization rates, and microstructure. From this, he affirmed that Emily's body began decomposing in the spring of 2002, directly matching the time she disappeared, rather than in another season. This was a key point emphasized by the prosecution to eliminate all hypotheses that the body was brought to the forest at a different time, or that disposal was carried out by an individual unrelated to the actual disappearance night. After the presentation on the mechanism of death, the prosecutor shifted to the physical evidence group to compare with the vehicle formerly owned by Luis. Since the 1998 Honda Civic had been destroyed in 2009, the forensics lab used standard samples from similar models provided by Honda for comparison. The fiber expert was called to the stand to explain the polymer structure and size of fibers recovered from fabric fragments found in the burial pit. He pointed out that 3 dark gray microfibers and 1 black microfiber had pit structure matching the floor carpet and interior materials of the 1998 Civic, including the 17-19 micron size and graphite charcoal shade. Although microfibers could not uniquely identify one specific vehicle, The expert clarified that the match, combined with the soil match results and movement timeline, made it highly likely that the body had contact with the interior of a Civic of that model. When the prosecutor asked, "Can you conclude that the victim was in a 1998 Civic?" the expert replied, "Based on the fiber characteristics, I can say this possibility is significantly higher than for other vehicles from the same era." Moving to soil forensics, the prosecutor called the soil analysis expert to present the similarity between soil adhering to the victim's clothing and accessories and soil from the parking lot behind the Blue Star Diner, where Luis commonly parked in 2002. The expert described that soil from the collar and metal accessories had iron oxide ratios and abraded quartz particles similar to samples from the area behind the freezer warehouse, where the gravel base was repaired in 2001. The gravel particles found in the soil clumps on the victim's clothing matched the size and color of the gravel used in that repair. When the prosecutor asked, "What does the soil match signify?" the expert explained, "It indicates the victim had contact with soil from that area in very close temporal proximity to death." This aligned with the timeline from witnesses, confirming Emily appeared in the back parking lot after the diner and entered Luis's vehicle. Also during the trial, the prosecutor compared seized items from Luis's apartment in 2017, including paper maps with hand-circled routes from the diner to the forest, matching the direction forensics identified as the body transport route. The prosecutor presented that the existence of the hand-circled maps, along with the 1998 Civic registration papers and schedule notes with a page torn out during the week of Emily's disappearance, showed abnormal indicators that the jury needed to consider, even if not decisive evidence. When the prosecutor displayed the laser mapping model reconstructing the burial pit shape, the jury was explained how the victim's body was placed in position, body orientation, soil depth, and compression points, proving the pit was dug manually. The prosecutor concluded the forensic evidence presentation by arguing that the body concealment method demonstrated the actions of a single individual, a small, shallow pit with uneven structure, indicating the perpetrator lacked skill and acted under time pressure. Combined with a terrain movement model, the prosecution determined this person carried the body from the vehicle along a short trail into the forest, completely matching the location indicated by the soil match. As the forensic portion concluded, the trial moved to the next phase. On the fourth day of trial, the prosecutor shifted focus to reconstructing the entire case timeline, from the moment Emily Russo disappeared in 2002 until the body was discovered in 2017, while analyzing the chain of contradictions in Luis Navarro's 3 interrogations to prove intentional changes in statements as new data emerged in each phase. The prosecutor began with a timeline table displayed on a large screen before the jury, divided into 3 columns: original 2002 data, 2017 forensic data, and Luis statements 2002-2017. Then sequentially connected each point. According to the presentation, Emily left the Blue Star Diner at 22:10. A 2002 witness saw her walking alone for a few minutes. The phone was turned off at 22:14. No one saw Emily after that. However, the prosecutor emphasized that the 2002 timeline remained missing a critical piece until forensics and new witnesses were added in 2017, time of death in the 22:30, 1 o'clock window. Soil match, showing the victim contacted the diner back parking lot just before being moved. The 2017 diner witness confirming Emily entered Luis's vehicle in the 22:12-22:15 window, and the vehicle exit route matching the path to the body discovery site. After re-establishing the complete timeline, the prosecutor began analyzing Luis's statements across the 3 interrogation phases. Interrogation 1, Luis claimed to leave the parking lot before 22:05, did not talk to Emily, did not see her after her shift, and went straight home. The prosecutor pointed out that at that time, police had no cameras, no forensics, no witness confirming Emily entered Luis's vehicle, so the statement was not deeply challenged. Interrogation 2. Lewis changed his statement, saying he left the parking lot around 22:15. 22:20 stood near Emily, longer than a few seconds, and didn't clearly remember whether they interacted. The prosecutor emphasized that the change occurred precisely when forensics confirmed death in the 22:30, 1 o'clock window, showing the subject attempted to adjust the time to fit new data. Interrogation 3. Lewis changed the most details, including the exit route, time arriving home, level of interaction with Emily, and denying entering the forest, before admitting he had gone on that trail a few times. The prosecutor proved the three statement versions could not coexist. As each time new data appeared, Lewis adjusted his account to reduce his own involvement. The jury was shown a three-column comparison table: 2002 statement, 2017 statement, third 2017 statement, with major contradictions marked in red: departure time from parking lot, position in the lot, travel route, arrival home time, and forest access. The prosecutor noted that none of Lewis's statements aligned with forensic or witness data. Instead, each version was internally contradictory or refuted by objective data. When presenting the departure time contradiction, the prosecutor emphasized that Lewis claimed in 2002 to leave before 22:05, but forensics determined Emily's phone turned off at 22:14, and the new witness confirmed Emily entered Lewis's vehicle at 22:12, 22:15. Lewis could not have left at 22:05 and still been present to pick up Emily at 22:12, 22:15. This was considered the key contradiction. The prosecutor continued analyzing the travel route contradiction. 2002 statement went straight to Route 9. 2017 statement possibly went around the back. Third statement: don't remember, but probably took the trail to avoid traffic. The prosecutor pointed out there was no traffic that night, and the back route was the only direction leading to the forest where Emily was buried. The next emphasized contradiction was the unaccounted time from 22:15, 23 o'clock. Louise could not provide a consistent explanation for arriving home, while the apartment complex witness confirmed Louise's vehicle did not appear before 23 o'clock. This time gap matched forensics, time of death and the time needed to carry the body into the forest and dig a shallow pit. Finally, the prosecutor presented the contradiction regarding forest access. Louise claimed in 2002 never been in that forest, but in 2017, when confronted with the old friend's statement, admitted had gone on that trail a few times with friends. This destroyed Louise's entire argument of not knowing the burial area. The prosecutor concluded the timeline presentation by emphasizing that Louise's statements were not merely faulty memory after 15 years, but a chain of intentional adjustments across phases to evade new forensic and witness data. According to the prosecution, the contradictions across the three interrogations, combined with the forensic timeline, formed a consistent chain of reasoning pointing to one sole possibility: Louise was with Emily in her final hours. Louise knew the route to the forest well, and Louise was the only person with reason to adjust his statements each time the truth closed in on his actions. The night Emily disappeared in 2002. After the prosecutor completed their presentation on the timeline and the contradictory statements of Luis Navarro, the trial moved into the deliberation phase, where the entire jury was tasked with examining each group of forensic evidence, witness testimonies, the 2017 forensic data, and the evolving chain of statements across three interrogations spanning 15 years. The judge reiterated the scope of the jury's responsibility to determine, based on the verified evidence, whether Louise committed first-degree murder, second-degree murder, a lesser degree of criminal responsibility, or was not guilty if the evidence was not sufficiently convincing. During the 2 days of deliberation, the jury was granted full access to the complete 2017 forensic file, including soil analysis, microfiber evidence, crime scene burial reconstruction models, mtDNA results, along with copies of the 2002 statement and the two 2017 statements for comparison. They also requested to review the investigators' video presentation on the timeline from 22:10 to 23 o'clock on the night Emily disappeared, the time frame considered central to the entire case. By noon on the third day, the jury sent a note to the judge informing him that they had reached a unanimous decision. As Louise was brought back into the courtroom, the atmosphere shifted to one of complete tension. The victim's family sat silently, no one saying a word, while the defense team maintained composed faces, but their eyes clearly betrayed anxiety. The judge asked the jury foreperson to stand and read the verdict. The foreperson held the signed paper, their voice steady and emotionless, but each word carried enough weight for everyone in the room to feel the gravity of more than 15 years of waiting. According to the verdict, the jury concluded that, based on the combined forensic evidence, contradictory statements, reconstructed timeline data, and new witness testimony, Luis Navarro was found guilty of second-degree murder under New Jersey state law. With the reasoning that the actions leading to Emily's death were intentional harm but lacked evidence of premeditation due to no physical evidence or indicators showing preparation prior to the encounter in the parking lot. Nevertheless, the jury agreed that the act of killing and disposing of the body demonstrated clear awareness of the consequences and the years-long efforts to conceal the crime, including changing statements, avoiding contact with investigators, and erasing vehicle traces, constituted a high degree of danger under the state's evaluation criteria. After announcing the guilty verdict, the trial moved to the sentencing phase, where the prosecutor requested the maximum sentence within the penalty range for second-degree murder from 20 to 30 years imprisonment without eligibility for early parole. The arguments presented included the 15-year chain of conduct, the deliberate concealment of the body, and the refusal to cooperate during multiple investigation phases despite opportunities to come clean as early as 2002. In contrast, the defense attorney argued that there was no direct DNA evidence linking Luis to the body. The 1998 Civic was no longer available for forensic examination, and changes in statements could be due to the long passage of time causing memory distortion, not necessarily intentional deception. However, the prosecutor countered that the soil and microfiber forensics provided consistent indirect evidence that the 2017 diner witness confirmed Emily entering Luis's vehicle, that Luis's statements changed precisely when new discoveries were publicized, and that this indicated evasion rather than faded memory. The judge considered both arguments but emphasized that the jury had comprehensively reviewed the case and reached a guilty conclusion. The court's remaining task was to impose a sentence based on the severity of the conduct and the defendant's level of danger. In pronouncing the sentence, the judge analyzed that the act of taking a life, combined with efforts to dispose of the body to avoid detection, constituted significant aggravating factors. The judge also noted that although there was no evidence of premeditation or a clear motive for murder, the impulsive act still warranted full responsibility under state law. Ultimately, the court sentenced Luis Navarro to 28 years imprisonment at the New Jersey State Prison, with a requirement to serve a minimum of 25 years before becoming eligible for parole or sentence reduction due to the serious nature of the offense and the prolonged concealment of the crime. When the sentence was read, Luis showed no strong reaction, only looking down at the table with tightly clenched hands, while Emily's family sat motionless, no one bursting into emotion, but their faces clearly showing relief after nearly 2 decades. The trial concluded in a heavy atmosphere, where pain, waiting, and belated justice intersected, marking the official end of the trial phase in a case that had haunted the Lakewood community for 15 years. Immediately after the 28-year sentence was handed down to Luis Navarro, the New Jersey Attorney General's office launched a comprehensive review of the case's impact, particularly the errors in the initial 2002 investigation and the reasons the file remained frozen for nearly 15 years for reopening. The compiled report pointed out that in the early stage, the LPD lacked resources and standardized procedures for adult missing persons cases, leading to inadequate prioritization and missed opportunities for breakthroughs, such as failing to seize the suspect vehicle in time, not preserving the parking lot crime scene to forensic standards, not conducting an expanded search within the first 24 hours, and not fully utilizing witness statements from the diner when memories were fresh. Part of the issue was era-specific. In 2002, there was no centralized forensic database, no expanded mtDNA techniques, no traffic camera systems, and no full standards for investigating adult disappearances, but the report also noted that a conservative approach, overly focused on the possibility of the victim voluntarily leaving the area, prevented the case from being escalated to high-risk status from the start. The personnel evaluation also revealed that the initial investigation team consisted of only 3 members, rotating among multiple cases, resulting in inconsistent follow-up on Luis Navarro, the last person seen near the victim. In 2004, the 1998 Civic was sold. In 2009, the vehicle was destroyed. Yet throughout that period, there were no intensified efforts to track the vehicle's history or request preservation of evidence. The report concluded that this was one of the most critical losses of evidence, making the case nearly unsolvable without the unexpected luck of the 2017 body discovery. Following the case, the New Jersey Department of Law and Public Safety issued a new set of procedures called the NJMP Red Protocol for adult missing persons cases, applying urgency similar to that for minors within the first 48 hours. The new protocol requires establishing a dedicated investigation team within 2 hours of receiving the report, assessing risk based on unusual behavior, communication history, travel patterns, and the last known environment, immediately preserving an expanded scene even without clear signs of crime, standardizing collection and preservation of microtrace evidence, conducting expanded interviews within 6 hours with all individuals present at the last location, and establishing information-sharing mechanisms across units to prevent years-long investigation interruptions like in Emily's case. In parallel, the LPD also implemented a new training program for frontline investigators, using Emily Russo's file as an example to analyze the chain of errors and consequences. Internal documents clearly state if the parking lot scene had been properly secured, if witness statements had been collected sooner, if the suspect vehicle had been impounded within the first 24 hours, the case could have been resolved in 2002. This is considered the most significant reform for the Lakewood investigation unit in 2 decades. For the Lakewood community, the multi-year impact of the case left strong aftershocks. Many residents expressed that they had lived through an entire generation with the fear that the perpetrator was still somewhere in the area unpunished. When the sentence was announced, many felt justice was late but necessary, and the case prompted community organizations to launch personal safety education programs, especially for young people working night shifts or alone. Moreover, universities and businesses in the area adopted new policies, installing additional outdoor cameras, setting up internal hotlines, providing employee escort services from workplaces to parking lots, and requiring regular lighting checks in industrial areas where Emily disappeared. Legally, the Emily Russo case became a precedent in handling cold cases in New Jersey. The state forensic system was upgraded for long-term preservation of thousands of old samples, soil and microfiber analysis techniques were updated, and mandatory case re-evaluations every 5 years were implemented. Investigators from the cold case unit confirmed that the case outcome proves no file is truly hopeless if forensics and investigative methods continue to advance over time. By the end of 2017, Emily Russo's file was officially closed with the status solved, conviction secured. The internal file index was last updated, over 2,000 pages of documents, 19 forensic reports, 12 microscopic analyses, 3 suspect interrogations, 15 years of investigation interruption, and 1 sentence closing the entire lengthy process. In the final summary, investigators revisited the note that the case, though resolved, remains a reminder of the importance of early response, scene preservation, consistent investigative procedures, and that a small error in the initial stage can delay justice for decades. The file was sealed in the Cold Case Unit archives, marking the official end to the case that had haunted Lakewood for nearly 2 generations. In the context of contemporary American society, the story of Emily Russo is not just a 15-year criminal investigation file, but also a direct reminder of the vulnerabilities that any modern community can face if complacent about personal safety and risk assessment. The fact that Emily disappeared right after her shift at the Blue Star Diner, just minutes after exiting the back door at 2210, clearly illustrates the fragility of those transitional moments that many young Americans still experience daily, especially those working late shifts, students, or single workers. Details like the dimly lit parking lot, lack of outdoor cameras, and the presence of a strange vehicle that went unreported at the time are real factors that many towns and cities in America are still working to improve. From an investigative perspective, the 2002 errors, not seizing Lewis's 1998 Civic in time, not securing the parking lot, not deploying a search grid in the first 24 hours, reflect a reality that many U.S. police agencies later had to drastically change. Evaluating adult missing persons cannot rely entirely on the assumption of voluntary departure. The file remaining frozen for 15 years, only breaking when workers discovered the skeleton in the industrial area in 2017, underscores the importance of modern forensic technology, mtDNA, soil matching, laser mapping, all advancements that ensure justice is not buried with time. The practical lesson for every individual in American society is that vigilance is not a manifestation of fear, but a vital life skill, informing loved ones when leaving a late shift, avoiding walking alone in poorly lit areas, noting suspicious license plates, and not dismissing any signs that make one feel uneasy. For communities, the story reminds that safety systems are only strong when every link, businesses, residents, local government, recognizes its responsibility. Installing cameras, improving public lighting, enhancing rapid response procedures. Justice for Emily came late, but the lessons from her story can help protect others in today's American life. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice for Emily Russo. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss important case-breaking stories like this one. See you in the next video, where we continue to explore files that seem forgotten but are unexpectedly revealed by the light of truth.